Chapter 2192. Shangguan Fenglan was silent. Indeed. Back then, in order to protect Qin Batian, Zhouqian Palace had sacrificed too much, so much so that many people could not accept it. For example, the Great Elder had always been brooding over the death of the palace master. He also hated the name Qin Batian to the extreme. Alas! A moment later, Shangguan Fenglan sighed, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said, "It's all in the past, let's not talk about it." Qin Feiyang nodded. Shangguan Fenglan glanced at Yin Hui and then at Elder Yun, and said, "Although Yin Hui has repeatedly harmed you, I still want to plead for her." "I know. After all, she is Elder Yun's daughter," Qin Feiyang said. "Yes. You may not know. Back then, in order to protect your ancestor, Elder Yun also participated in the bloody battle with the dragons. And he almost died at that time," Shangguan Fenglan said. "Almost died?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. "Yes. I believe you can also see that Elder Yun is a very good person. I really don't want him to suffer the pain of losing his daughter at this age." Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Qin Feiyang was silent. "Of course. I also understand how you feel. After all, she has tried to harm you more than once. But I believe that after this incident, coupled with Elder Yun's restraint in the future, she will definitely slowly restrain herself. Not to mention for our sake, just for the sake of Elder Yun's protection of your ancestor, you should let her go," Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyang frowned. "Your ancestor valued friendship and righteousness. If it was him today, I believe he would do the same," Shangguan Fenglan said again. Qin Feiyang still did not say a word. Elder Yun sighed secretly, turned to look at Yin Hui, and said, "Give me the dagger." Yin Hui was stunned and asked suspiciously, "What are you going to do?" "Don't ask," Elder Yun said. Yin Hui glanced at the dagger in her hand and looked at Elder Yun suspiciously. She then tossed the dagger to Elder Yun. The dagger was still stained with purple gold dragon blood. Elder Yun grabbed the dagger and walked towards Qin Feiyang. This time, the artifact spirit was no longer careless. However, Elder Yun had no intention of harming Qin Feiyang. He walked in front of Qin Feiyang and handed him the dagger with both hands. Qin Feiyang looked at the dagger and frowned. "What are you doing? Earlier, Yin Hui used this dagger to assassinate you. Right now, give him a taste of his own medicine. Use this dagger and chop off this old man's head. I only ask that you give her a way out after this old man dies." Old Yun lowered his head and said. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. "Are you really willing to die for her?" "I have no regrets." Elder Yun nodded. Then he turned to look at Yin Hui and smiled. "After this old man dies, live a good life. Don't think about avenging us anymore." Yin Hui's face was dull. Even if it was an unrelated person, seeing the other party risking his life to save her, she would be touched. Not to mention that the old man in front of her was her biological father. Although this biological father came too suddenly and she couldn't accept it for a while, she still couldn't help but feel a trace of warmth in her heart. "Jiang Hao, Qin Feiyang, use this old man's life to end this once and for all. Come on." Elder Yun didn't wait for Yin Hui to answer. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said. His eyes were firm, without the slightest fear of death. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Mu Tianyang, don't be silent. Give me a suggestion." Mu Tianyang said helplessly, "What advice can I give on this kind of thing? Do as you see fit." Qin Feiyang really didn't know how to choose for a moment. Yin Hui did deserve to be killed. But back then, it was an indisputable fact that Elder Yun protected his ancestor. Elder Yun even used his own life to exchange for Yin Hui's. He couldn't bear such great fatherly love. "What's going on?" "She tried to harm me again and again, and I actually sympathize with her? Could it be that I'm just like my ancestors, hiding a benevolent heart? No. This woman must not be allowed to live." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with killing intent. With Yin Hui's personality, even if he let her go now, she wouldn't know how to be grateful and would definitely continue to harm him. She was a disaster. If he didn't get rid of her, there would be endless trouble in the future. Seeing the killing intent in Qin Feiyang's eyes, Elder Yun's heart trembled. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Since you're not going to do it, I'll do it myself." After saying that, He grabbed the dagger and stabbed it toward the top of his head. No. Yin Hui's expression changed as she hurriedly cried out. Shangguan Fenglan's expression also changed greatly as she hurriedly went forward to stop him. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows, raised his big hand like lightning, and grabbed Elder Yun's wrist. You. Elder Yun looked at him in shock. Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered. A moment later he suddenly smiled coldly and said, "Since you want to die, then let me personally end your life." After saying that, he snatched the dagger from Elder Yun's hand and with a poochie sound, it pierced into Elder Yun's head. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Father, Yin Hui crazily pounced in front of Elder Yun and slapped towards Qin Feiyong. However, Qin Feiyong seemed to have already expected this. He released the dagger and retreated. Yin Hui did not chase after him. She hugged Elder Yun who was slowly falling down, her face full of pain. "Don't die. I beg you. You've already abandoned me once. Don't leave me again, okay?" However, no matter how she shouted, she couldn't stop Elder Yun's life from dissipating. "Live well." Elder Yun powerlessly grabbed Yin Hui's hand, his face full of love. "No. If you die, what's the point of me living? I beg you, you must hold on." Yin Hui shook her head, took out a large number of life pills and God's soul pills, and stuffed them into Elder Yun's mouth, but to no avail. Soon, the fluctuations of life completely dissipated. "Wake up, I'll change. As long as you wake up, I will never seek revenge on Qin Feiyong again, I beg you. I've already lost too much, I can't lose you too." Yin Hui roared, tears falling like rain. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Elder Yun, then turned to look at Qin Feiyong angrily, and said, "He's already like this, and even knelt down in front of you, can't you let him go?" Qin Feiyong did not answer and looked at Yin Hui silently. "Please wake up, okay? I really know I was wrong. In the future, I will definitely turn over a new leaf and be a good person." Yin Hui kept crying out sorrowfully, full of regret. Why did it become like this?" Qin Feiyong finally opened his mouth and asked, "Are you serious? Do you really know you're wrong?" "I really know I was wrong." Yin Hui nodded, as if she had lost her soul, as if she was a walking corpse. But, now that she knew she was wrong, what could she do? Could she save the life of the old man in her arms? Qin Feiyong looked at Yin Hui, suddenly smiled, looked down at Elder Yun, and said, "You can get up." As his voice fell, Elder Yun immediately opened his eyes. The dissipated fluctuations of life appeared again. "This is..." Shangguan Fenglan's eyes widened. Yin Hui and the head of the Yin family also looked at Elder Yun in shock. What was going on? Elder Yun looked at Yin Hui with gratification, got up and looked at Qin Feiyong, bowed and said, "Thank you." Qin Feiyong said, "No need to thank me, I just hope that in the future, she won't trouble me again." "Don't worry, I will restrain her and enlighten her. If there is a next time, you don't need to do anything, I will personally end her life." Elder Yun said. "That's good." Qin Feiyong nodded. Yin Hui heard the conversation between the two, looked up at the dagger on the top of Elder Yun's head, and said in confusion, "Father, what is going on?" Elder Yun smiled, grabbed the dagger, and pulled it out directly. Blood spurted out, but he didn't look weak at all. He looked at the dagger, looked at Yin Hui, and said with a smile, "Actually, Qin Feiyong didn't really want to kill me just now." Yin Hui was surprised. Shangguan Fenglan also looked at Elder Yun suspiciously. Elder Yun said with a smile, "This knife didn't hit my soul, it only pierced through my sea of consciousness." Yin Hui was stunned and asked, "Why did he?" Elder Yun said, "Do you want to say why he did this?" "Yes." Yin Hui nodded. "He is a good person. Just before, when I was about to commit suicide, he stopped me and secretly sent me a message, saying that he wanted to test you." Elder Yun said. "Test?" Yin Hui was more and more confused. "He said that he wanted me to pretend to be killed. After I fall, if you can repent, then this matter will be dropped. And if you continue to be stubborn, then I will no longer care about your life and death." I also agreed. And in the end, you didn't let me down. Elder Yun smiled with relief. "I see." Shangguan Fenglan suddenly understood. Thinking about it carefully, when Qin Feiyong grabbed Elder Yun's wrist, he did pause for a moment before snatching the dagger from Elder Yun's hand. In other words, it was in a moment, Qin Feiyong and Elder Yun secretly reached an agreement. What a false alarm. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyong and said apologetically, I'm sorry I wronged you again. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm used to it. Qin Feiyong said lightly. Shangguan Fenglan smiled awkwardly. Qin Feiyong looked at Yin Hui and said, if it wasn't for Elder Yun this time, even the gods wouldn't be able to save you. I hope you can cherish this opportunity. Yin Hui looked at Qin Feiyong with a complicated expression. After a long time, she sighed and said gratefully, thank you. Qin Feiyong looked at Elder Yun again and said, I have repaid the favor of you protecting my ancestor. If there is a next time, I won't be merciful. Thank you. Elder Yun also expressed his sincere gratitude. As for you, Qin Feiyong looked at the patriarch of the Yin family. The patriarch of the Yin family immediately panicked. Forget it. You're on your own in the future. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Thank you, young Master Zhang. The patriarch of the Yin family was overjoyed and quickly bowed to thank him. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and nodded to the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit waved his hand, and the death domain immediately collapsed, and the death force that robbed vitality also dissipated. At this time, Shangguan Fenglan and the others were completely relieved. Chapter 2193. All right, it's time to go. When the artifact spirit and the Grey Castle returned to the Qi Sea, Qin Feiyong said with a smile, Go. Shangguan Fenglan was startled and asked suspiciously, Where to? Qin Feiyong swept his gaze across the endless sea and laughed. The world is so big, there must be a place where I can go. Shangguan Fenglan frowned. You aren't going to look for the dragons, are you? Look for the dragons? With my current strength, would I dare to look for them? I still have this bit of self-awareness. Qin Feiyong shook his head and laughed. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Shangguan Fenglan. All right, don't make things difficult for Long Tianyu. Why should I make things difficult for him? He's just a child. Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyong was startled and laughed. Then it seems that I was worried for nothing. All right then, take care when you go back later. Help me thank your sister, and tell her not to look for Yin Hui anymore. After he finished saying those words, Qin Feiyong waved his hand and disappeared. Elder Yun looked at Qin Feiyong's back and laughed. What a loyal and righteous young man. That's right. This personality is too similar to his ancestors. It's a pity that our Nine Heavens Palace can't protect him, otherwise, he wouldn't have to wander outside. Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Dragons? Elder Yun muttered, shook his head and sighed. This terrifying race is indeed not something that our Nine Heavens Palace can provoke. Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Suddenly, Elder Yun slapped his head and exclaimed, Qin Feiyong, wait a minute. What is it? Qin Feiyong stopped and looked back at Elder Yun in confusion. Elder Yun turned to look at Yin Hui and said, Give me the crescent jade pendant. Father, you're not going to give it to him, are you? Yin Hui looked at Elder Yun in shock. Don't ask, just give it to me. Elder Yun laughed. Yin Hui sighed helplessly. She took out the black crescent moon jade pendant and passed it to Elder Yun. Elder Yun immediately chased after Qin Feiyong with the jade pendant. Throughout the entire process, Qin Feiyong looked at Elder Yun suspiciously. Meanwhile, Mu Tianyong frowned as he looked at Elder Yun's back. Very soon, Elder Yun rushed in front of Qin Feiyong and stuffed the crescent jade pendant into Qin Feiyong's hand. This is? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Not long ago, he had seen Yin Hui use this crescent jade pendant. However, he did not know what use this jade pendant had. Elder Yun said, This old man knows that you will fight with the dragons sooner or later. At that time, this mystic moon jade pendant will be able to save your life at a critical moment. Divine moon jade pendant. Qin Feiyong mumbled. Elder Yun said, This mystic moon jade pendant is made of heavenly domain divine stone. You probably don't know about heavenly domain divine stone, right? Qin Feiyong nodded. Heavenly domain divine stone? He seemed to have heard Shangguan Fenglan mention this thing before. Could it be that Shangguan Fenglan was talking about this mystic moon jade pendant? Heavenly domain divine stone is extremely rare. There are only 3 in the entire northern region. One is in this old man's hands. One is in the hands of the pavilion master of the treasure pavilion. The other is in the hands of our 9 Heavens Palace master. Elder Yun said. So little? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Suddenly, his expression froze as he asked suspiciously, Wait, didn't the palace master already fall? The palace master has already fallen, but when your ancestor left with the dragons, she gave the heavenly domain divine stone to your ancestor. It was also because of the heavenly domain divine stone that your ancestor successfully escaped when the dragons were about to deprive him of his bloodline power. Elder Yun said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyong suddenly understood and asked, Then what is the use of the heavenly domain divine stone? The heavenly domain divine stone doesn't have any lethality, but it has a heaven-defying ability that can completely block a person's existence. Elder Yun said. Completely block a person's existence? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Yes. As long as you have the heavenly domain divine stone, no one can find you with their divine sense. Even some divine objects with the ability to spy on you can't spy on your existence. In short, the heavenly domain divine stone and the hidden soul stone have the same effect, but they are of a higher level. The hidden soul stone is useless in the face of an existence above the paramount god level. But the heavenly domain divine stone is different. Even if it's an existence above the paramount god level, as long as they don't say anything and stand behind him, he won't be able to sense it. Elder Yun said. So powerful? Qin Feiyong was shocked. When he came back to his senses, he looked at Mu Qing and whispered, What about the all-seeing eye? The all-seeing eye? Elder Yun was stunned and said suspiciously, Are you talking about the legendary all-seeing eye, one of the top 10 fighting souls? Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. I haven't tried it yet. Because the all-seeing eye has never appeared in the northern region. Elder Yun said. I see. Qin Feiyong nodded and said with a smile, Then I will accept it. Elder Yun said, If you don't accept it, I will feel bad. He did this to make up for the harm the Feng family had done to Qin Feiyong. Thank you. Qin Feiyong thanked him and put the divine moon jade pendant on his neck. Elder Yun said, Then we will meet again. See you again. Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and smiled, then turned and disappeared at the end of the sea. It's finally over. Elder Yun let out a long breath and a rare smile appeared on his face. He then turned and flew toward Shangguan Fenglan and the others. Yin Hui was speechless and said, Father, you really gave it to him. No matter how powerful the celestial divine stone is, it is just a worldly possession. What's the harm in giving it to him? Elder Yun said with a smile. You are really generous. Yin Hui complained unhappily. Enough. Let's not talk about the past. Elder Yun said. Shangguan Fenglan glanced at Yin Hui and then looked at Elder Yun and said, Elder Yun, I think Qin Feiyong's true identity should continue to be hidden. That's what this old man thinks too. Back then, for Qin Batian, the dragons went to war. Now, if Qin Feiyong's identity is exposed, I am afraid that the same thing will happen again. Elder Yun was worried. Sigh. Although the power of the purple gold dragon blood can give them unprecedented talent, it is also a fatal source of disaster. Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Yes. Brother Yin, if the grudge is over, I hope that you can keep Qin Feiyong's identity a secret. Elder Yun looked at Yin Hui and Elder Yun and said, Don't worry. At this point, how can I still be his enemy? Right now, I just want to live the rest of my life in peace. The patriarch of the Yin family sighed. Yin Hui pondered for a while and said, If revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it? I have thought it through and will stay by your side in the future. Elder Yun and the patriarch of the Yin family looked at each other with smiles on their faces. Elder Yun suddenly turned to Shangguan Fenglan and asked, Fenglan, can we enter 9 Heaven Palace again? Enter 9 Heaven Palace? Of course not. Although the grudge between you and Qin Feiyong is over, the world knows about Yin Hui's death. Not to mention entering 9 Heaven Palace, even if you appear in front of others, it will cause a commotion. At that time, I'm afraid that the world will talk about you behind your back. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and hurriedly looked at Elder Yun. Elder Yun shook his head and said, I'm not afraid of people talking. Father, let it go. Although you're not afraid, 9 Heaven Palace can't bear this infamy. Anyway, I've already seen through everything. It doesn't matter if I return to Nine Heaven Palace or not. Yin Hui said. Then you. Elder Yun was anxious. As a father, he naturally wanted the best for his children. In his opinion, letting Yin Hui return to Nine Heaven Palace was the best. Since I'm a dead person now, there's no need to cause a commotion. I'm going to hide my identity and find a remote place to live a new life. Yin Hui said. I'll go with you. As for hiding your identity, now that you and Elder Yun have acknowledged each other, you can go back to your original name. The patriarch of the Yin family said. Go back to my original name. Yin Hui murmured and nodded with a smile. All right, I'll be called Yun Wang from now on. I'll forget everything in the past and live a new life. Yun Wang. The patriarch of the Yin family and Elder Yun looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. How could she give a name so casually? However, this was Yin Hui's idea, so they couldn't say much. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Elder Yun and smiled. Then let's go back. You can go back, Elder Yun said. And Shangguan Fenglan was stunned. It wasn't easy to reunite with Hui. I want to spend some time with her. When you go back, please apologize to the Great Elder on my behalf. However, although I won't return to Nine Heaven Palace, I'll always be a member of Nine Heaven Palace. In the future, if Nine Heaven Palace is in trouble, I'll rush back to help. Elder Yun said. Shangguan Fenglan smiled helplessly and nodded. All right, I'll pass on your words to Great Elder without missing a word. Thank you for your help. Elder Yun smiled gratefully and cupped his hands. Then we'll meet again. See you later. Shangguan Fenglan also cupped her hands and smiled. Hui, our brother Yin, let's go. Elder Yun looked at Yin Hui and the patriarch of the Yin family and smiled, then turned and flew away. Yin Hui and the other two nodded to Shangguan Fenglan and Mu Tianyang, and immediately chased after Elder Yun. Shangguan Fenglan looked at the backs of the three people and shook her head. I thought that Yin Hui would definitely die, but I didn't expect it to end like this. There's nothing I can do. Who asked Yin Hui to be Elder Yun's biological daughter? And I know Qin Feiyong too well. It's hard to refuse someone who owes him a favor. Mu Tianyang said. Shangguan Fenglan was slightly stunned. She turned to look at Mu Tianyang and said, If you didn't say anything, I would have forgotten that you were here. Mu Tianyang was stunned and said speechlessly, Is my presence that low? Shangguan Fenglan asked, Did you already know Qin Feiyong's true identity? Isn't it obvious? Mu Tianyang said. Then what about Hua Yi? Shangguan Fenglan asked again. He doesn't know. He's the only one among us who's kept in the dark. Mu Tianyang smiled. In fact, Hua Yi already knew that Qin Feiyong had the power of the purple gold dragon blood when Qin Feiyong fought with the black dragon. He just didn't show it. Shangguan Fenglan nodded and said, Then let's go back. Chapter 2194. You go back first. I still have something to do. Mu Tianyang said, seeming to be a little absent-minded. What can you have to do? Shangguan Fenglan frowned. Mu Tianyang was slightly stunned, and immediately looked at Shangguan Fenglan angrily, saying, Palace Master, what you said makes me uncomfortable. I am also a human. Why can't I have something to do? Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and said with a smile, Okay, you can go back by yourself when you are done. Be careful on the way. The Sky Dragon Sea is not a joke. Okay. Mu Tianyang nodded. Swish. Shangguan Fenglan disappeared from Mu Tianyang's sight with a teleport. Mu Tianyang hurriedly called Mu Qing out and said in a deep voice, Open the all-seeing eye and see if you can spy on Qin Feiyong. Mu Qing nodded, and a strange light suddenly appeared in his eyes, but what he saw in the end was chaos. How can this be? Mu Qing was surprised. Mu Tianyang looked at him suspiciously. Although in the Sky Dragon Sea, it will affect the all-seeing eye, I can still see the general direction. But now I can't see his trace at all, not even a trace. Mu Qing said in disbelief. There is no trace at all. Mu Tianyang murmured and his face suddenly sank. What's wrong? Mu Qing asked. If I'm not wrong, what blocked Qin Feiyong should be that crescent jade pendant. Mu Tianyang gloomily said before asking, Artifact Spirit, Do you know what that crescent jade pendant is?
Yes.
It is made of sky domain divine stone, and it can completely block a person's existence. A hoarse voice full of the smell of blood sounded in Mu Tianyong's body.
Damn it! I actually let this guy get such a heaven-defying treasure.
Mu Tianyong was furious. Although he had always been at a disadvantage in the hands of Qin Feiyong, he actually didn't care. Because he still had Mu Qing. Mu Qing's all-seeing eye could spy on Qin Feiyong at any time. In other words, he could control Qin Feiyong's movements at any time and place. But now that Qin Feiyong had obtained the divine moon jade pendant, his only advantage was gone. In that case, he would be more passive when dealing with Qin Feiyong in the future. Is there a need to be so angry? Suddenly, a faint laugh rang out. They saw that Qin Feiyong, who had already left, was now standing in front of Mu Tianyong. You didn't leave? Mu Tianyong raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyong said with a smile, I suddenly thought of you so I came back. Mu Tianyong snorted coldly, You really got a big bargain this time. Qin Feiyong said, Don't be like this. We are in a cooperative relationship. What's mine is yours.
Is that so? Then give it to me now.
Mu Tianyong sneered. Qin Feiyong laughed, looked at Mu Tianyong and asked curiously, The voice that sounded in your body just now, was it the weapon spirit of the blood blade?
Yes. Mu Tianyong nodded.
It can communicate with you? It's really strange. Why have Chang Shui and the weapon spirit of the ancient castle never communicated with me? Qin Feiyong frowned.
Mu Tianyong said, How would I know? You have to ask them.
If they were willing to communicate with me, would I be so puzzled? Let's not talk nonsense. Do you want to go to the deepest part together? Qin Feiyong asked. I haven't thought about it yet. Mu Tianyong pondered for a while and shook his head. Qin Feiyong said, You are not interested in the most mysterious and powerful divine land of the ancient world? Look at you, it seems like you want me to go? Tell me honestly, are you playing some kind of conspiracy?
Mu Tianyong frowned.
Conspiracy? You are thinking too much. Do you think I am you? Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. Mu Tianyong sneered and said, We're all sensible people. Why is there a need to feign ignorance? There is really no conspiracy. I asked you to go purely because we can take care of each other. After all, the heavenly dragon sea is not ordinary danger.
I am not confident if I am alone.
Qin Feiyong said.
Come on. Do you think I don't know?
You are afraid that I will snatch the soul line of the ninth heaven palace, so you want to take me with you?
Mu Tianyong sneered. Ahem.
Qin Feiyong coughed.
What? Are you embarrassed that I have seen through you?
Mu Tianyong said with a playful face. Well, I admit I do have this idea.
But this is only secondary.
As you said, as long as we work together, there is nothing we can't do. And this time, I may enter the divine land, so I want to continue to work with you and go to the divine land. Qin Feiyong said. Hearing this, Mu Tianyong lowered his head and pondered. Mu Qing glanced at Qin Feiyong and frowned, saying, Ancestor, he is going to the divine land to find Qin Batian. We don't have to follow him and take the risk, do we?
That makes sense.
Qin Batian is so powerful. Even if I find him now, I can't take revenge. Mu Tianyong nodded. Qin Feiyong glared at Mu Qing, then looked at Mu Tianyong and said with a smile, Come with me. I will let you cultivate in the castle. Mu Tianyong was stunned, then his eyes lit up and he asked hurriedly, Really? When Mu Qing heard that she could go to the ancient castle to cultivate, she could not help feeling a rush of excitement. Do you think I will lie to you?
You can go in now.
Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Mu Tianyong was really tempted. 1 day in the castle was equal to 1 year, while 1 day in the Gold Crow Temple was equal to half a year. In the long run, the gap between him and Qin Feiyong would become bigger and bigger. But he hesitated. It was not easy to find out the whereabouts of the soul line. Would it be a pity to give it up? Suddenly, Mu Tianyong looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, Didn't you say that Yin Hui has a soul line when you sent the message last night? Why didn't you take it? I didn't think about the soul line at all. Moreover, Elder Yun has already given me the mystic moon jade pendant. If I were to snatch her soul vein, That would be too unreasonable. Let's talk about it later. How many soul lines can Yin Hui have? Even if she has a few, their levels won't be high. For us, this kind of low-level soul line is meaningless. Qin Feiyong said with a smile.
Because of the rules of time in the castle, their speed of refining soul stones was much faster than others, so those low-level soul lines were not enough for them.
That's true.
Mu Tianyang nodded.
Although we can't get a high-level soul line in the northern region, think about it, there will be a lot of soul lines in the Divine Land.
Qin Feiyong said again.
Makes sense. Mu Tianyang nodded again. The Divine Land was stronger than the northern region, so there must be more soul lines. Although it's difficult to enter the Divine Land, I believe that we can do it together.
Qin Feiyong said with a smile.
Okay. I'll go with you. Tell me about the situation in the Divine Land. In the face of these temptations, Mu Tianyang really couldn't resist, so he didn't hesitate anymore. I also heard about the situation in the Divine Land from the Deputy Pavilion Master. Qin Feiyong took the two of them to the depths of the Sky Dragon Sea while talking slowly. Ninth Heaven Palace. In a courtyard. He's actually a descendant of Qin Batian. The first elder sat in a pavilion, looking at Shangguan Fenglan standing opposite him. He was in a trance. After a long time, he recovered and asked, "Then why didn't you bring him back?" Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Bring him back for what?" "The son pays his father's debts. Qin Batian killed the palace master. Shouldn't he be asked to atone for his sins?" The first elder said angrily. Shangguan Fenglan's body stiffened, and she hurriedly said, "First elder, although the death of the palace master is because of Qin Batian, it's the fault of the dragons."
The fault of the dragons, the first elder murmured and said angrily. Then why don't you go find the dragons for revenge?
Do you have the ability? I don't. But we can't put the blame on Qin Batian. Moreover, Qin Batian didn't force us to protect him back then, we did it willingly. First elder, every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. We can't vent our anger on Qin Batian just because of the death of the palace master. Not to mention Qin Feiyong. He's just a junior, and he only knows the truth now. Shangguan Fenglan shouted. Shut up.
No matter what, the death of the palace master is because of Qin Batian, and this is something this old man will never forgive.
The first elder shouted. Sigh. Shangguan Fenglan sighed and asked, "Then what do you mean?"
The first elder said, "Go and catch him for this old man."
Catch him. First elder, in order to help our Nine Heavens Palace lift the ban on the treasure pavilion, do you know how much Qin Feiyong has paid? Wouldn't it be disappointing to do this? Moreover, you know Frenzy's attitude towards Qin Feiyong. He definitely won't let you do this. Shangguan Fenglan said.
Then hide it from him. The first elder said in a deep voice.
This? Shangguan Fenglan was at a loss for a moment.
First elder, you're going too far.
But at this moment,
the courtyard door was kicked open, and a man in fiery clothes strode into the pavilion, looking at the first elder with displeasure.
Shangguan Fenglan raised her eyebrows and said, "Xueqi, what are you doing here?" Mu Tianyang sneaked away in the morning, and I knew that something must have happened, so I quietly ran over. The result is as I expected. Xueqi said. The first elder frowned and looked at Xueqi. Don't interfere in these matters. It's not that I want to interfere, it's Master. Xueqi said. Vice Palace Master?
The first elder was shocked.
Yes. Actually, Master already knew Qin Feiyong's identity. Xueqi said. Already knew?
The first elder and Shangguan Fenglan looked at each other.
Otherwise, why would I approach Qin Feiyong? It's to control his every move. And Master also said that if one day Qin Feiyong's identity is exposed, no one is allowed to fight against him. Xueqi said. Really? The first elder didn't believe it. After all, the Vice Palace Master wasn't here, and there was only Xueqi's side of the story. Xueqi said, "Whether it's true or not, won't you know when Master returns?" This. The first elder frowned and hesitated. I have already conveyed Master's words to you. As for what to do, you can think about it yourself. After Xueqi finished speaking, he didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. Chapter 2195. Shangguan Fenglan's eyes flashed.
She turned to look at Xueqi and said, "Don't go yet.
Wait for me outside. I have something to ask you." Xueqi was slightly stunned. He looked back at Shangguan Fenglan and nodded. Okay. After saying that, he walked out of the courtyard and stood outside, waiting for Shangguan Fenglan. Shangguan Fenglan retracted her gaze and looked at the First Elder. "First Elder, I know you're uncomfortable, but I still hope you can think twice." The First Elder glanced at Shangguan Fenglan and remained silent. "Think about it carefully. I'll take my leave first." Shangguan Fenglan bowed and said before turning to leave. But after taking a few steps, the First Elder suddenly asked, "Is Elder Yun really not coming back?" Shangguan Fenglan said, "It's not that he's not coming back. He just wants to spend more time with his daughter." The First Elder fell silent again. Sigh. Shangguan Fenglan sighed and walked out of the courtyard. She looked at Xueqi and said, "Follow me." After saying that, the two flew in the direction of Lotus Lake. Soon, the two landed on the top of a mountain. Shangguan Fenglan frowned and said, "Are you going to find Qin Feiyang?" Xueqi was stunned and said in surprise, "How do you know?" "Intuition," Shangguan Fenglan said. Xueqi smiled and said, "Then you women's intuition is really accurate." "Don't be so cheeky. Do you know where Qin Feiyang is going? Do you know what kind of calamity he will face in the future?
"If you go to find him now, you'll die with him,"
Shangguan Fenglan said angrily. Xueqi looked at Shangguan Fenglan in astonishment and asked, "Are you concerned about me?" "Kind of.
"But don't misunderstand.
I'm concerned about you because of your master. I believe that your master definitely doesn't want you to take this risk." Shangguan Fenglan said. A trace of disappointment crept onto Xueqi's face. He shook his head and sighed. "Do you think I want to go? I have a reason why I have to go."
"A reason why you have to go?"
Shangguan Fenglan was stunned. "Yes." Xueqi nodded. "What reason?" Shangguan Fenglan was suspicious. The corners of Xueqi's mouth rose as he chuckled and said, "If you promise to be my wife, I'll tell you." Scram. Shangguan Fenglan's face darkened. Okay, I'll leave right now." Xueqi nodded again and again, and before Shangguan Fenglan could react, he disappeared without a trace. Shangguan Fenglan stood at the top of the mountain in a daze. After a long while, she came back to her senses. Shaking her head, she sighed and took out the image crystal. Wang. Very soon, a shadow appeared. It was Shangguan Qiu. "Elder sister." Shangguan Qiu greeted him warmly. Shangguan Fenglan smiled and said, "There's no need to look for Yin Hui anymore." "What is it?" Shangguan Qiu looked at her in confusion. Shangguan Fenglan said, "We have found her and accepted the matter. Qin Feiyang asked me to pass you on to thank you for your help." "I see." Shangguan Qiu nodded in understanding, but then his expression suddenly changed. He asked suspiciously, "Qin Feiyang? Who is Qin Feiyang?" "Qin Feiyang is Jiang Haotian. He is the descendant of Qin Batian." Shangguan Fenglan said. "What? He is the descendant of Qin Batian?" Shangguan Qiu was stunned. "You must be surprised." "At first I was like you." Shangguan Fenglan smiled. "Are you kidding?" Shangguan Qiu asked. Shangguan Fenglan shook her head. "No wonder he kept asking about the dragons and insisted on going to the Sea of Sky Dragons." Shangguan Qiu murmured, looked at Shangguan Fenglan and asked, "Where is he now?" "I don't know. We separated at the Sea of Sky Dragons. I think he might want to go to Divine Land," Shangguan Fenglan said. Divine Land. Shangguan Qiu's eyes flickered. Whoosh. Suddenly, there was a sound of something breaking through the air. Shangguan Fenglan turned around and saw a woman in black coming at them like lightning. It was Wang Yun. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Shangguan Qiu and said, "Remember not to reveal Qin Feiyang's identity." "Understood." Shangguan Qiu nodded. Shangguan Fenglan turned off the image crystal and looked at Wang Yun again. "Palace Master, I finally found you." Wang Yun landed in front of Shangguan Fenglan and said, "What's the matter?" Shangguan Fenglan looked at her in confusion. Wang Yun said, Just now, a disciple reported that someone saw Yin Hui at the Sea of Sky Dragons. Shangguan Fenglan was slightly stunned and nodded. I know about this. You know? Wang Yun was surprised. Yes. Don't worry about this. I have a task for you. From now on, you will guard the entrance of the stairway to heaven. Except for the disciples, if anyone leaves the ninth heaven palace, you must report to me immediately. Especially the great elder, or his confidants. Shangguan Fenglan said. What do you mean? Wang Yun was puzzled. Don't ask, just do as I say. But remember, don't expose your whereabouts. It's best to hide in a space divine item. Shangguan Fenglan said. Yes. Wang Yun responded respectfully, then turned and left quickly. Sigh. What an eventful autumn. Shangguan Fenglan sighed, and with a flash, disappeared without a trace. The Sea of Sky Dragons. In the sky above a certain sea. Dragons rule the divine land. I didn't expect this race to be so terrifying. After listening to Qin Feiyang's story, Mu Tianyang's face was full of shock. Mu Qing was the same. Qin Feiyang glanced at Mu Tianyang and said, Do you feel the pressure all of a sudden? Pressure? Mu Tianyang smiled and said domineeringly, There is no pressure. I'm only looking forward to the dragon's soul line and treasures. Qin Feiyang was stunned. The dragons rule the divine land, which is equivalent to ruling the entire ancient world. You can imagine how many treasures there are in the dragon's treasury. Mu Tianyang's eyes lit up as he spoke. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, Why did I only find out now that you are also a money grubber? Nonsense. How can I, a dignified emperor, be compared to those vulgar money grubbers? Mu Tianyang said discontentedly. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded repeatedly. Mu Tianyang said, Don't talk nonsense. Let's go to the castle quickly. Mu Qing's eyes were full of expectation when she heard that. So impatient? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Nonsense. You have already broken through to the half-step Divine Lord realm. If I don't work hard, won't I be left further and further behind by you? Mu Tianyang said. What are you afraid of? You have a heaven-defying artifact. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Don't you have one? Mu Tianyang rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyang chuckled and glanced at the sea below. The sea was very calm. There was no trace of sea beasts. It seemed that even the heavens were taking care of him and did not encounter any sea beasts causing trouble. What? You don't mean what you say? Do you believe that I will turn around and leave now? Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not respond, Mu Tianyang could not help but raise his eyebrows. Don't. I'll take you in now. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said with a smile, then waved his hand and disappeared above the sea. However, right after Qin Feiyang entered the ancient castle, one enormous head after another emerged from the sea surface. Those were the heads of sea beasts, and they were all extremely ferocious. But the strange thing was that their eyes were filled with fear. At the same time, when Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing appeared in the castle, everyone opened their eyes and looked unfriendly. Especially Tantai Li. The disgust in her eyes was undisguised. Long time no see. But Mu Tianyang acted as if nothing had happened and looked at everyone with a smile. No one paid attention to him. Tantai Li frowned and said, Feiyang, are you really going to let them stay here? No matter what, we are partners now. It's only right that we take care of each other. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. That's right. Although we did have a lot of grudges in the past, we are now on the same boat. Mu Tianyang echoed with a smile. Tantai Li said in a deep voice, Then you'd better behave, or don't blame us for being rude. Madam Li, you're exaggerating. Now that I'm living under someone else's roof, how would I dare to mess around? Mu Tianyang sighed. That's best. Tantai Li snorted coldly, closed her eyes, and continued to cultivate. The others and the white-eyed wolf also closed their eyes and continued to cultivate. Ancestor, do you see that? Their cultivation has already broken through to half-step god lords. Mu Qing looked at everyone with a solemn expression and transmitted her voice. Yes. Mu Tianyang responded secretly. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and said, You can cultivate here, but I definitely won't allow Xueqi.
Mu Tianyong was stunned and nodded with a smile. Understood, understood. Qin Feiyong did not say anything else and took out the map of the Sky Dragon Sea.
What's this?
Mu Tianyong looked at the map suspiciously and said without batting an eyelid, Mu Qing, quickly take the opportunity to cultivate.
Yes. Mu Qing responded respectfully.
She glanced at the ancient castle, then walked to a corner, took out the soul stone, and sat cross-legged alone to cultivate.
Mu Tianyong went to Qin Feiyong's side and looked down at the map.
After a moment, he said in surprise, It's actually the map of the Sky Dragon Sea?
Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded.
This is a treasure. Where did you find this?
Mu Tianyong was surprised.
Give it to me, Deputy Pavilion Master.
Qin Feiyong said.
Mu Tianyong was stunned and exclaimed, He's even willing to give you such an important map. This old man treats you extraordinarily well.
Qin Feiyong didn't pay any more attention to him and carefully looked at the map.
After a while, Qin Feiyong frowned and said, In terms of distance, with our current cultivation, it will take at least 5 years to reach the deepest part of the Sky Dragon Sea.
5 years. Mu Tianyong's expression froze. It actually took 5 years. 5 years is just a conservative estimate.
Because on the way, we will definitely encounter a lot of sea beasts. If there are sea beasts, there will definitely be delays. In other words, even if we can overcome the various dangers and successfully reach the deepest part of the Sky Dragon Sea, I'm afraid it will take at least 7 to 8 years. It's really a long journey.
Qin Feiyong sighed.
7 to 8 years it is. Anyway, you're the one who's rushing.
I'll take the opportunity to cultivate. Mu Tianyong laughed.
When Qin Feiyong heard this, he could not help but stare at Mu Tianyong angrily.
Chapter 2196.
It's no use glaring at me. Because I only said that I would accompany you to the Divine Land, but I didn't say that I would travel with you. Mu Tianyong chuckled, then turned around and walked to Mu Qing's side, ignoring Qin Feiyong's anger. He sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes.
Qin Feiyong rubbed his forehead weakly.
To be honest, he didn't want to travel, because it was a waste of time. But the castle was sealed by the golden small beast, so he had to control it himself. As for the Black Tortoise Realm, that was even more so. The Black Tortoise Realm was a real small world, and no one except him could control it.
Wait, wasn't there the Grey Castle?
Qin Feiyong patted his head. He could enter the Grey Castle and let the weapon spirit take him to the deepest part. In this way, he could stay in the castle and cultivate. With that in mind, Qin Feiyong left the castle. At that moment, he was stunned. Why were there so many sea beasts on the sea? He didn't even see one before. At the same time, those sea beasts that thought that Qin Feiyong had left and floated to the surface of the sea, saw Qin Feiyong appear again, and immediately dived into the sea in panic. In the blink of an eye, not a single sea beast could be seen on the surface of the sea.
What's going on?
Qin Feiyong was extremely shocked. Why did they all look like they had seen a ghost? After thinking for a long time, Qin Feiyong still couldn't figure out the reason, so he flew forward. Just like before, it was calm all the way. Those sea beasts seemed to have disappeared into thin air. An hour later, a small island appeared in front of him. The island was overgrown with weeds and rocks, and it looked extremely desolate. Qin Feiyong took out the map, checked it carefully, and his eyes darkened slightly. According to the map, this island was a very dangerous place. Because there was a demigod sea beast king on the island, and it ruled the nearby sea area with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Qin Feiyong put away the map, glanced at the island, and finally gritted his teeth and flew over the island. However, even after he had traversed more than half of the island, he didn't see a single sea beast. Not to mention the so-called sea beast king. What the hell is going on? Qin Feiyong was puzzled. Suddenly, he seemed to have discovered something and lowered his head to look at a canyon on the left. A trace of bewilderment crept into his eyes. There was actually a corpse in the canyon. It was the corpse of a vicious crocodile. It was over 10 meters long and its body was covered in thick scales. Qin Feiyong swooped down and landed beside the corpse. The corpse did not decompose. His blood did not coagulate either. It felt like he had died not long ago. There were no other wounds on the corpse except for a bloody hole between the eyebrows of the head. It was obvious that he had been killed with a single blow, and his soul had been shattered. Wait a minute. Qin Feiyong seemed to have discovered something. He frowned slightly and moved closer to look at the blood flowing out of the bloody hole. The color of this blood was different from normal blood? It was a dark red color. This isn't right. Normal blood would never be dark red in color. Only those people or beasts that had been dead for a long time would have blood like this. Could it be that this vicious crocodile hadn't just died? That's right. The cultivation of this vicious crocodile must be very strong. That's why its blood did not coagulate and its body did not rot. Only its blood changed color. Wait a minute. Could this vicious crocodile in front of him be the half-step god realm sea beast king? If it was really it, then all of this would make sense. After all, a half-step paragon god's body wouldn't rot for at least a few thousand years. If that was the case, then this vicious crocodile had been dead for at least 4 to 5 years. What are you looking at? Suddenly, the spirit appeared and asked puzzledly. Look at it. Qin Feiyong came back to his senses and pointed at the corpse of the vicious crocodile. The spirit glanced at the corpse and said, It's probably been dead for 4 to 5 years. Qin Feiyong was stunned and said, You think so too? I can tell by looking at its blood. But, is there a problem? You've been here for so long? The spirit asked. No. I'm just curious. How did it die? Qin Feiyong said. What's there to be curious about? Sea beasts are the same as you humans. In order to fight for territory they often kill. Besides, every day, many people come to the Sky Dragon Sea to adventure. Maybe some expert came to this island and killed it. The spirit said. I know. But I found a problem. Qin Feiyong was puzzled. What problem? The spirit was suspicious. You said that the Sky Dragon Sea is the biggest forbidden area in the North region. There are countless sea beasts. But since I set off until now, I haven't even met a single sea beast. The strangest thing is that half an hour ago, when I came out of the castle, I saw a lot of sea beasts. However, when they saw me, it was as if they had seen a ghost and all of them dived into the sea. This doesn't fit their personality? Qin Feiyong frowned and said. The spirit said, Maybe you're lucky. They're full today and don't want to bother with you. Qin Feiyong was stunned. This reason was too nonsensical. The spirit said impatiently, Is there a need to be troubled by these small problems? Let's go. Is this just a small problem? Qin Feiyong muttered. In his opinion, this was a big problem. Because this was too abnormal. Roar. Suddenly, a series of deafening roars came from behind. And Qin Feiyong was startled. So, he hastily soared into the sky and raised his head to look over. Whoosh! He saw a fiery red flowing light streaking across the sky like lightning, flying toward the small island. And behind it, a large group of sea beasts followed. Each of them was ferocious and full of hostility. Obviously, they were chasing that fiery red flowing light. When the flowing light approached, Qin Feiyong was stunned. How could it be him? That was a young man wearing a fiery red robe. His long hair was also red like fire. From afar, it looked like a ball of flame. That's right. He was Xueqi. When did he come to the Sky Dragon Sea? Qin Feiyong looked at Xueqi suspiciously. The spirit took a look at Xueqi and returned to Qin Feiyong's body. Qin Feiyong. Soon, Xueqi also noticed Qin Feiyong and laughed. So you're here? What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Why did it sound like he was here specifically to find him? Whoosh! Xueqi rushed to the front of Qin Feiyong, looked back at the sea beasts behind him, and said anxiously, Run for your life first, we'll talk later. After saying that, Xueqi continued to run without looking back. Qin Feiyong stood in the air in a daze. He was really here to find him? What are you still doing? Didn't you see those sea beasts? Let's go. Realizing that Qin Feiyong did not follow, Xueqi immediately stopped and looked at Qin Feiyong. Okay. Qin Feiyong came back to his senses and was about to turn around and chase after Xueqi, but at this moment, a strange scene appeared. The sea beasts that were chasing him actually turned around and ran away like a swarm of bees. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Hua Yi also had a look of astonishment. Moreover, Qin Feiyang also found that when those sea beasts saw him, it was exactly the same as the sea beasts he encountered half an hour ago. Their eyes were filled with deep fear. What was going on? Hua Yi scratched his head and flew to Qin Feiyang's side. Looking at the escaping sea beasts, he asked suspiciously, "Did they suffer in your hands?" "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Then why did they run away as soon as they saw you?" Hua Yi asked. "How would I know? I've been wondering about this problem. Since I entered the Heavenly Dragon Sea, I haven't seen a single sea beast attack me," Qin Feiyang said. "No way." Hua Yi was dumbfounded. Along the way, he was chased by sea beasts until he almost had nowhere to go. "It's true," Qin Feiyang said. "Is it so strange?" Hua Yi frowned. "It's a little strange." Qin Feiyang nodded. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and turned to look at Hua Yi. "Why did you come here?" Hua Yi chuckled and said, "Of course I'm here to find you." "Why are you looking for me? Also, how did you know I was in the Heavenly Dragon Sea?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Looking for you. Naturally there's a reason," Hua Yi said vaguely and then said, "As for how I know? Naturally, I overheard the conversation between Lan and Great Elder." Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank and he asked, "What did Shangguan Fenglan say to Great Elder?" "What should be said has been said, and what shouldn't be said has also been said," Hua Yi joked. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Then don't you already know?" "Yes. I already know that your name is Qin Feiyang, and that you're a descendant of Qin Batian," Hua Yi said. "Then why did you come to find me?" Qin Feiyang said. "What does that have to do with anything? It's impossible that I'll cut ties with you just because you're a descendant of Qin Batian, right? In one's life, it's rare to meet a few bosom friends, so you have to cherish them." Hua Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. In fact, he was quite touched in his heart and said, "Then does Shangguan Fenglan know that you came to find me?" "Of course she knows." Hua Yi nodded. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, "Then when did you come?" Hua Yi said, "After listening to their conversation, I came." Qin Feiyang said in surprise, "Then your speed is too fast, you caught up in such a short time?" "Of course. My methods are unfathomable." Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang complacently. Qin Feiyang was speechless, then his face turned solemn, and said, "Since you already know my identity, then you should be able to guess what I'm going to do next." "Are you sure you want to take the risk with me?" Hua Yi said, "I'm already here, isn't that the best proof?" "All right. What you want to do is your own right. I have no right to interfere. I only hope that you won't regret it when the time comes." Qin Feiyang said. Hua Yi proudly said, "In my dictionary, there is no such word as regret." Looking at Hua Yi's arrogant look, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but want to kick him. Hua Yi said suspiciously, "Let's get down to business. How did you scare away those sea beasts?" "I really don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head, glanced at the sea ahead and said, "If you don't believe me, then follow me." "All right." Hua Yi nodded. Immediately after, the two turned into a stream of light and disappeared at the end of the sea. Chapter 2197. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. On the morning of the third day, a middle-aged man in black clothes hurriedly left Nine Heaven Palace. Not long after the middle-aged man left, Wang Yun appeared on top of the stairway. Why did he leave Ninth Heaven Palace? Looking at the peak below, Wang Yun muttered and took out an image crystal. Wang. Shangguan Fenglan's image appeared. Wang Yun said respectfully, "Palace Master, Wu Zhongtian left Ninth Heaven Palace." Wu Zhongtian. Shangguan Fenglan was shocked and asked anxiously, "When did this happen? How many people?" Wang Yun said, "Just now he was alone." "Alone?" Shangguan Fenglan frowned and pondered for a while then said, "I know, continue to monitor him." "Yes." Wang Yun replied, put away the image crystal, and disappeared. "Grand Elder. Are you still going to make a move? Do you know what kind of consequences this will bring to Ninth Heaven Palace?" Shangguan Fenglan stood by the lotus lake and sighed faintly. After hesitating for a moment, she took out the image crystal. "Wang."
Shangguan appeared and asked suspiciously, "What's wrong?" "Sister." Shangguan Fenglan said, "Wu Zhongtian left Ninth Heaven Palace. I think he might have been ordered by the Grand Elder to hunt down Qin Feiyang." "Wu Zhongtian." Shangguan body shook. Shangguan Fenglan said worriedly, "Wu Zhongtian's strength is unfathomable, even I can't see through it. If he really went to hunt down Qin Feiyang, the consequences would be unimaginable." "Then why did you send me a message?" Shangguan asked. "I can't stop the Grand Elder, and I can't go to the Sky Dragon Sea to help them, so I can only ask the Treasure Pavilion." Shangguan Fenglan said. Shangguan said, "You want the Treasure Pavilion to protect Qin Feiyang?" "It's not about protection. Just blocking Wu Zhongtian is enough." Shangguan Fenglan said. "This is not child's play. I have to ask Master and the Vice Pavilion Master first." Shangguan said. "Okay, ask them and arrange it." Shangguan Fenglan said. Shangguan nodded. At the same time, after 3 days of hurrying, Qin Feiyang and Xueqi had already ventured deep into the Heavenly Dragon Sea. During these 3 days, not a single sea beast attacked them. This caused Xueqi to feel incredulous to the extreme. What was going on? Before meeting up with Qin Feiyang, the sea beasts seemed to have gone crazy and chased him everywhere. However, after meeting up with Qin Feiyang, there was no trace of any sea beasts. No one would believe that there was no reason for this. But what was the reason? Could it be that Qin Feiyang had something that these sea beasts were afraid of? Suddenly, another island appeared in their sights. The island was several hundred miles wide, with undulating mountain ranges and sea beasts roaming about. Qin Feiyang stopped and took out the map. He checked it and said, "According to the map, the danger level of this island is level 3. Level 3. Xueqi was stunned. On this map, the danger level of each place is clearly marked. From level 1 to level 9. Level 1 is the lowest and level 9 is the highest. Qin Feiyang explained. "So that's how it is." Xueqi nodded in understanding and said with a smile, "Then rank 3 isn't much." "Wrong. This map was given to me by the Vice Pavilion Master. And the person who drew this map, even if he is not the Vice Pavilion Master, his strength is definitely not inferior to the Vice Pavilion Master. In the eyes of these people, level 3 danger level is indeed nothing, but for us, it is fatal." Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. "Listening to what you said, it does seem to make sense. After all, their cultivation is much stronger than ours." "Then should we take a detour or?" Xueqi asked. Qin Feiyang glanced at the island, his eyes flashed, he put away the map and smiled. "Enter the island." Xueqi was slightly stunned and asked, "Such a dangerous place, why don't we take a detour?" "I want to confirm again, are these sea beasts afraid of me or not?" After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he took a step forward and descended above the island. Xueqi quickly followed. Roar! Upon seeing Qin Feiyang, one of the sea beasts below immediately let out a roar. Boom! At this moment, the island was in an uproar. One by one, the sea beasts fled for their lives. For a time, the island was collapsing, as if it was the end of the world. Xueqi exclaimed, "This scene is too spectacular." "Is this the point?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him, used the Xing character art, and chased after a half-step divine realm sea beast. Today he had to figure it out. It had always been humans who were afraid of beasts, but he had never seen a beast so afraid of humans. That sea beast panicked when it saw Qin Feiyang chasing after it. The other sea beasts also stayed far away from them. In their eyes, Qin Feiyang was like a devil. "Why are you chasing me?" That sea beast roared. "Then why are you running?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. The sea beast roared, "Isn't it normal for us sea beasts to run when we see you humans?" "Normal my ass. I'm just a half-step divine lord. Is there a need for you to be so afraid?" Qin Feiyang said. "Big brother, master. Please don't chase after me, okay?" The sea beast wanted to cry but had no tears. If it were other humans, they would be happy to encounter such a thing. Why would they chase after it? But this human actually took the initiative to approach. He was simply a freak. Qin Feiyang said, "Tell me why you're so afraid of me and I won't chase you." "I don't know. I'm just following the beast god's orders."
Don't chase me anymore.
The sea beast roared anxiously. The beast god's orders? Qin Feiyong was taken aback. Yes. If you want to know the reason, go to the beast god. Why are you looking for me? That sea beast was helpless. Where is the beast god? Qin Feiyong asked.
The sea beast said, in the deepest part.
The deepest part? Qin Feiyong was surprised. The beast god is the ruler of this sea. We have to listen to him.
That is, the beast god ordered us to stay away from you.
The sea beast said. You really don't know the reason?
Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. I really don't know. Please, can you stop chasing after me?
That sea beast was about to cry. Because it found that although the other party was only a half-step divine lord, his speed was actually faster than it. Qin Feiyong frowned and finally stopped.
Only then did the sea beast breathe a sigh of relief and then fled without looking back.
Beast god?
The ruler of this sea region.
Xueqi was also a little stunned. Looking at Qin Feiyong, he said, be lenient if you confess, be strict if you resist. Be honest, what kind of relationship do you have with this beast god? How would I know? I've only come to the Sky Dragon Sea twice. The first time was when I sparred with Frenzy on Turtle King Island.
And the second time is now.
Qin Feiyong said.
Xueqi said. Then why did this beast god give such an order?
I already said I don't know, yet you still ask?
Annoying.
Qin Feiyong said angrily. Fine.
I won't ask any more.
Xueqi waved his hand. Although I don't know the reason, it's a good thing for us.
How about this?
You're riding a spatial divine item to bring us along? Qin Feiyong looked at Xueqi and said. You guys?
Xueqi was stunned and asked suspiciously. Who else?
Mu Tianyang. Qin Feiyong said. What the hell?
That guy is also here.
Xueqi was stunned.
He's now in my spatial divine item.
Qin Feiyong nodded.
I heard Lan tell the Great Elder that you didn't leave alone? When did he get together with you again?
Xueqi said.
I was the one who instigated him to come.
Qin Feiyong said. Instigated?
You're really bad.
You want to die, but you don't forget to drag someone down with you. This Mu Tianyang is really stupid. He was so easily fooled by you. Xueqi despised.
Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes and said, just tell me, do you want to bring us along?
No. I have to cultivate too, okay? Xueqi shook his head.
Who would be willing to do such a chore?
If you want to cultivate, go back to the 9th Heaven Palace to cultivate. Why did you come here to join in the fun?
Qin Feiyong said.
I'm happy to. Xueqi shrugged, looking very much like a scoundrel.
Qin Feiyong sighed helplessly and waved his hand. Fine.
Since you already know my identity, I don't mind letting you know a little more.
And Xueqi was stunned and his eyes lit up. What other secrets do you have that you can't see?
Qin Feiyong replied helplessly, Artifact Spirit, come out.
Shwa!
Artifact Spirit immediately rushed out from Qi Si.
Could it be the demonic creature that Lana spoke of?
Xueqi looked at Artifact Spirit in surprise. But Qin Feiyong and Artifact Spirit ignored him. Qin Feiyong looked at Artifact Spirit and asked, with your speed, how long will it take to reach the deepest part of the Sky Dragon Sea?
Should be half a year.
Artifact Spirit thought for a moment and said.
Qin Feiyong was pleasantly surprised. Then it can save a lot of time.
Artifact Spirit proudly said, compared to you, it can indeed save a lot of time.
Qin Feiyong smiled and said, all right then, bring us along.
I knew there wouldn't be a good job.
Artifact Spirit pouted and nodded. All right, who asked you to be this sovereign's master now?
After saying that, he summoned his main body.
Qin Feiyong glanced at the Grey Castle, looked at Artifact Spirit and said, then I'll go into your main body now?
Artifact Spirit nodded. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, rolled up Xueqi, and disappeared without a trace.
Artifact Spirit also followed into the Grey Castle, and then the Grey Castle quickly shrank, like a speck of dust, and broke through the air. P.S. Notice, during this period of time, the country is cracking down on pornography and illegal publications, and chapters with sensitive words will be blocked, which may lead to chapter confusion, repetition, and so on. If such a situation occurs, please refresh or add bookshelves. Please forgive me. Chapter 2198. Back to Qin Feiyang and Xueqi. At this moment, the two were standing in a stone room about 100 feet wide. On the ground there was nothing. There were no decorations on the wall. The huge stone room seemed to be extremely empty. On the left wall, there was a stone door. The stone door was closed, exuding a strong aura. This was the space inside the gray castle. Xueqi looked around and was speechless. Such a heaven-defying demonic creature, how come there isn't even a single treasure? Isn't this lord the greatest treasure? The spirit appeared. How did you get in? Xueqi looked at it in astonishment. Nonsense. This is this lord's place. This lord can come in whenever he wants. The spirit said. Xueqi shook his head. No, aren't you on your way outside? The spirit was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang. Why did you find such a stupid friend? Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh. Damn. How am I stupid? Xueqi glared at the spirit. This castle is this lord's main body. This lord lives here. Why would I need to go outside? The spirit was speechless. Xueqi was stunned for a moment before he suddenly slapped his head and said with an embarrassed smile, "Look at my brain, I can't think straight." Stupid. The spirit shook its head. Hey. Even if I asked a low-level question, you don't have to look down on me like this. Xueqi said unhappily. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Qin Feiyang, you can now go and cultivate. The spirit said. Qin Feiyang was in the gray castle at this moment, so after entering the castle would naturally be inside. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, "Do you have a time array here?" Yes. The spirit nodded. Yes. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He just asked casually, but he didn't expect that there really was one. Xueqi was also quite surprised. He looked at the spirit and asked, "Is it powerful?" The spirit proudly said, "1 day is equal to 100 years. Tell me, isn't it powerful?" 100 years? Qin Feiyang and Xueqi's bodies shook. Their faces filled with disbelief. Qin Feiyang said, "Are you kidding?" Hey! The artifact spirit let out a sinister laugh. Qin Feiyang immediately rolled his eyes and said helplessly, "An old antique like you actually knows how to joke." The artifact spirit laughed hoarsely. All right, let's not waste any more time." Qin Feiyang nodded. With a wave of his hand, he brought Xueqi into the castle. Is it really just a joke? After the two of them left, the artifact spirit's blurry eyes flashed with ridicule. Inside the castle. "Brother Mu, you're too dishonest. You actually snuck away without telling me." Xueqi looked at Mu Tianyang with dissatisfaction. Mu Tianyang opened his eyes and smiled. "I just don't want to implicate you." "Nonsense. Do you think I don't know that you don't trust me?" Xueqi said. Mu Tianyang laughed dryly and said, "This is a very special place. Don't waste time. Hurry up and cultivate." Special? Xueqi was stunned. He glanced around and said in surprise, "There are actually so many people and beasts?" Following that, he looked at Qin Rushwang and said in surprise, "Miss Rushwang is also here?" "Miss Rushwang, long time no see. How are you?" Qin Rushwang opened her eyes and rolled her eyes at him. She closed her eyes again and did not say a word. Xueqi smiled embarrassedly and looked quite embarrassed. Wah! Suddenly, he looked at the white-eyed wolf again and curiously approached it. He reached out and touched the white-eyed wolf's fur and exclaimed, "I have never seen such a handsome wolf cub." "Get lost." The white-eyed wolf spat out this word coldly. Xueqi's arm stiffened. He was quite popular with others, but why were they all so cold now? He smiled embarrassedly and retracted his arm. Looking around, he asked suspiciously, "Brother Mu, did you find anything special?" Mu Tianyang said, "There is a time array here. 1 day is equal to 1 year." Time array? 1 day is equal to 1 year. Xueqi was slightly stunned and immediately said in dissatisfaction, "Previously, the artifact spirit made fun of me, and now you are also making fun of me. Do you think I am a 3-year-old child who is easy to fool?" Mu Tianyang was stunned and shook his head. "Believe it or not, it's up to you."
After that, he did not talk nonsense, closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Seeing this, Huayi's heart trembled. Could it be true? He could not help but turn his head to look at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and did not explain. He walked to the side of the mermaid princess and sat with the mermaid princess. He took out the soul stone and began to cultivate. It seems to be true. 1 day is equal to 1 year. Damn, this is even more powerful than the time array of the purple gold divine pagoda. No wonder these guys broke through so quickly. Hua Yi glanced at everyone, his expression full of shock. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong opened his eyes and looked at Hua Yi. How many soul stones do you need to refine to break through from half-step Divine Lord to initial Divine Lord? 500 million. Hua Yi said. What? 500 million? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. It took 5 years to refine 100 million soul stones. Then wouldn't it take 25 years to refine 500 million soul stones? Mermaid Princess suddenly said. It doesn't take 25 years. What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was stunned and looked at her suspiciously. After breaking through to half-step Divine Lord, we found that the speed of refining soul stones has also increased exponentially. Now, we can refine at least 300 soul stones a day. Mermaid Princess said. 300? Qin Feiyong was surprised. He remembered that when he broke through to half-step Divine Lord, he could only refine 150 soul stones a day. This was really an exponential increase. According to this calculation, it would take about 4,560 years to refine 500 million soul stones. According to the rules of time in the ancient castle, it would only take 4,560 days. In other words, it would take a little more than 12 years. It's actually very easy to calculate. Back then, it took you 5 years to refine 100 million soul stones. 500 million soul stones is 25 years. But now, the speed of refining soul stones is twice as fast as before. 25 divided by 2. Naturally, it's more than 12 years. Mermaid Princess smiled. More than 12 years, Qin Feiyong muttered. Although the time needed was not as long as he imagined, 12 years was still long enough. Others need thousands of years to refine 500 million soul stones, but you can refine it in 12 years. Are you still not satisfied? Hua Yi rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled bitterly. Yes, he should be satisfied. Compared to others, the ancient castle had already saved him a lot of time. Qin Feiyong asked, what about the realms after the initial stage of Divine Lord? From initial stage to initial stage, you need 1 billion soul stones. After initial stage, it will increase exponentially, 2 billion, 4 billion, 6 billion. Finally, to break through half-step to Divine Lord, you need a total of 8 billion soul stones. Hua Yi said. So much. Qin Feiyong was shocked. One had to know. Since he entered the ancient world, the total number of soul stones he had obtained was less than 40 billion. Of course. If he didn't give the 32.5 billion to Mu Tianyang, he would have more than 60 billion, close to 70 billion. But now, he estimated that he only had more than 30 billion. Not counting the small numbers, only the big numbers. He got 4 billion from Feng Zihan. He got 32.5 billion from the Treasure Pavilion. He got 400 million from Shangguan Fenglan, but a small part of this 400 million was given to Hua Yi. He won more than 300 million in the bet with Xueqi. And in the auction of the 4 symbols Infinite Divine Pill, he got 350 million. In total it was about 38 billion. Adding those small numbers that didn't count, it was less than 40 billion. And during this period, they also refined a lot. So now, there was probably only about 36 billion left. And now, including Qin Feiyong, there were a total of 9 people and 5 beasts in the ancient castle. To break through to initial stage Divine Lord, each person and beast needed 500 million soul stones, a total of 7 billion soul stones. To break through to initial stage Divine Lord, each person and beast needed 1 billion soul stones, a total of 14 billion soul stones. To break through to Great Success Divine Lord, each person and beast needed 2 billion soul stones, a total of 28 billion soul stones. In this way, it wasn't enough for everyone to break through to Great Success Divine Lord. Because just breaking through to Great Success Divine Lord required a total of 49 billion soul stones. It seems that no matter how many soul stones I earn, it's not enough. Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. This is giving you a headache? The bigger headache is yet to come. When you break through to Divine Lord, you'll need even more soul stones. Actually, to sum it up, soul veins are the root of the problem. Only with soul veins, and a large number of them, will we not have to worry about soul stones in the future. Xueqi said. Soul veins. Qin Feiyong murmured. If he could successfully enter the Divine Land, he must find a way to get more soul veins. Whoosh. Qin Feiyong took a deep breath and began to cultivate. After all, strength was the foundation of everything. Without strength, even if a level 9 soul vein was placed in front of you, you could only stare. Chapter 2199. Outside. The Grey Castle moved as fast as lightning, many times faster than Qin Feiyong. Moreover, with the strength of the Grey Castle, no sea beast dared to run out and block the way. Coupled with the beast god's order, there were no disturbances along the way. Half a year later, a huge island appeared on the horizon. From afar, it looked like a giant beast lying on the sea, sleeping, exuding a mysterious aura. However, when seeing the island, the Grey Castle did not fly straight in, but chose to take a detour. This was incredible. Because along the way, no matter how dangerous the island was, it did not avoid it. Swish! A figure appeared in the Grey Castle. It was Qin Feiyong. Although he was cultivating, he always kept track of the time. When half a year was up, he woke up from seclusion. The weapon spirit floated in the void, looking at Qin Feiyong, who suddenly appeared, and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing out here?" "It's been half a year, so I wanted to come out and ask if you have arrived." Qin Feiyong laughed. "How can it be so fast? The half a year I said was to reach the deepest part. But the deepest part is very big. In other words, even if we reach the deepest part, it will still take some time to reach the entrance of the Divine Land." The weapon spirit said. "I see. Where is the fire lotus? Why haven't I seen her yet?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. The weapon spirit seemed to not know how to answer. Looking at the hesitant weapon spirit, Qin Feiyong gradually frowned and said, "Are you lying to me about something?" The weapon spirit sighed. "Actually, the fire lotus is in the deepest part." "What did you say?" Qin Feiyong's face suddenly changed. The weapon spirit said, "But don't worry, she is absolutely fine." Qin Feiyong clenched his hands and said in a deep voice, "She better be fine, otherwise I will not spare you." After saying that, Qin Feiyong flashed and appeared in the sky above the sea. Woo-woo! Whoosh! Strong winds howled in all directions, and huge waves surged. The sky was also covered with dark clouds, appearing extremely gloomy. The artifact spirit also appeared and said angrily, "It's very dangerous outside. Why did you come out?" "I wanted to come out and take a look." Qin Feiyong said and asked, "Is this the deepest part of the Heavenly Dragon Sea?" "Yes. The deepest region is like this all year round. The wind is strong and the environment is very bad." The artifact spirit explained. Qin Feiyong nodded in understanding. Suddenly, he looked at the nearby island, and a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. On all sides of the island, the sky was dark. However, the sky above the island was bright and sunny. The sky was clear and boundless, as if it was two different worlds. Was this an illusion? The artifact spirit said, "There's nothing to see. Let's hurry up and continue our journey." There seemed to be a trace of guilt in his words. Although it was not obvious, Qin Feiyong still noticed it with his keen insight. This artifact spirit was definitely hiding something from him. "Let's go to the island and have a look." Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered slightly as he said. The artifact spirit was puzzled. "It's just a deserted island. What's there to see?" Qin Feiyong sneered. "You haven't even been there. How do you know it's a deserted island?" The artifact spirit seemed to be even more flustered and said, "Do we still need to go in?" "I can tell at a glance." "I really can't tell." Qin Feiyong glanced at the island, then turned into a stream of light and flew toward the island against the wind and waves. "Damn it!" The artifact spirit cursed secretly and quickly blocked in front of Qin Feiyong, saying, "Do you still want to go to the Divine Land?"
Qin Feiyong said, I just want to go to the so-called deserted island. What does it have to do with going to the divine land? You're wasting your time. The artifact spirit said angrily. Shut up. Do you really think I'm a fool? Do you think I can't see that you don't want me to enter that island? Qin Feiyong shouted. The artifact spirit trembled. Qin Feiyong said, I hate being lied to the most. It's not too late to tell me now. The artifact spirit was silent for a long time, then suddenly sighed and said, Since you insist on going, then go. As for why, you'll naturally know when the time comes. After that, the artifact spirit drove the grey castle back to Qin Feiyong's Sea of Qi, and said nothing more. Qin Feiyong looked up at the island, and his eyes flickered. What on earth was on that island? But for the sake of safety, he restrained his aura and quietly flew toward the island. Just as he entered the island, the head of a huge sea beast poked out of the surging sea. Roar! The sea beast stared at Qin Feiyong's back, and a fierce light flashed in its eyes, followed by a sudden roar that resounded in all directions. At this moment, Qin Feiyong was standing on a boulder at the edge of the island, looking at the sky curiously. The clear sky and warm sunlight were actually not illusions, and they really existed. But when he heard that sea beast's roar, his gaze trembled, and he hurriedly turned his head to look. But on the surface of the sea, he did not see anything. That roaring sea beast had already dived back to the bottom of the sea. Qin Feiyong looked for a while and did not think too much. He raised his head and swept a glance at the sky again, then quietly swept into the forest ahead. After all, in this heavenly dragon sea, especially in the deepest region, it was normal to have sea beasts. In the central region of the island, there was a valley. The valley was very large. Streams meandered around, and the bottom could be seen clearly. On both sides of the stream, vegetation was lush, and flowers bloomed. Moreover, there were countless peach trees planted in the valley. These peach trees were of different heights. Some peach trees had already borne fruit the size of a baby's fist, bright red and suffused with a sparkling luster, making people salivate with one look. Some were budding. The entire valley seemed to be covered in a layer of gorgeous colors, as if it was a paradise on earth. At the centermost position of the valley, there stood a pavilion. The pavilion had 2 stories, with carved beams and painted pillars. On the left, there was a small lake. The streams in the valley all converged here. On the right, there was a small garden. One beautiful flower after another vied with each other in full bloom. One lush green small tree after another swayed in the wind. There was also a pavilion in the small garden. Inside the pavilion, a man and a woman were shockingly sitting. The woman wore a pale yellow long dress, her figure exquisite and tall, her black hair dancing in the wind, her temperament ethereal. But unfortunately, she wore a mask on her face, blocking her true appearance. But from her temperament and figure, it was not hard to determine that she was an extremely beautiful woman. While that man also wore a fitted pale yellow long robe. He was around 20+ years old, his figure slender and tall, his face like jade, and his temperament was extremely extraordinary too. The 2 people sat opposite each other, drinking tea and chatting. Looking from afar, they were like a pair of immortal lovers living in seclusion in a peach garden. It was also at the same time that the sea beast roared that the young man's expression froze, putting down the teacup in his hand and raising his head to look at the sea outside. A trace of suspicion also crept up in the woman's eyes. All of a sudden, the corners of the young man's mouth curled up with a hint of playfulness. Then, he waved his hand and an image immediately appeared in the void in front of him. In the image there was a forest. A white-robed man was in the forest, looking around. The white-robed man was Qin Feiyong. Looking at Qin Feiyong in the image, the playful look on the young man's face became even more intense. However, the masked woman suddenly stood up. Her gem-like bright eyes seemed to be filled with anxiety. Looking at the masked woman's reaction, a trace of displeasure flashed across the young man's brows. He said, "Do you care about him that much?" The masked woman did not answer. Instead, she said, "I've already agreed to your conditions. Please don't make things difficult for him." I didn't want to make things difficult for him in the first place. But now that he's barging in, what do you think I can do? Most importantly, if he knows that you're here, will he let the matter rest? The young man said. The masked woman said in a deep voice,
You can get your subordinates to scare him away.
Scare him away?
The young man smiled playfully and said, "To be honest, I'm really curious. What kind of man is he that you care so much about?"
You.
The masked woman glared at the young man.
Don't worry. I promise I won't take his life.
But I'm afraid it's inevitable that he'll be injured and bleed.
The young man smiled.
The masked woman clenched her hands and said coldly, "Don't go too far. If you really anger me, it won't do you any good."
How would I dare to anger you? I just want to see if he's worth it for you to do this.
After the young man finished speaking, his lips moved slightly, and a silent order was immediately passed down.
At the same time, in the forest, Qin Feiyong moved closer without making a sound.
His eyes were observing the surroundings and his ears were listening in all directions. He appeared to be especially careful. However, what puzzled him was that after so long, there was not even a trace of a sea beast. Could it be, as the spirit said, that this was a deserted island? But this island was obviously not an ordinary place.
There must be something here.
Boom!
But suddenly,
the ground under his feet shattered. A fatal crisis arose in his heart. Qin Feiyong immediately retreated without hesitation. Then, he saw a blood-red divine light rushing out from the broken ground. Ah! It was a small beast that was only the size of a palm. It looked like a brown bear, but its fur seemed to be stained with blood, and it exuded a terrifying aura. Seeing that Qin Feiyong had dodged its attack, the brown bear was very surprised. Qin Feiyong was also sizing up the brown bear, and his pupils gradually shrank. He could not see through this little guy's cultivation. Judging from its aura, it should be at least a consummate divine emperor. The brown bear regained its senses. It stood in the air and looked down at Qin Feiyong in an overbearing manner. It shouted, "Human, who gave you the guts to barge into this island?" Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and smiled. "I didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive me. You're quite polite. However, I don't buy it. There is only one ending for those who dare to break into this island, and that is death." The brown bear's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and it turned into a blood-red light and charged at Qin Feiyong like lightning. And it went straight for Qin Feiyong's head. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "I've been very polite to you. Please don't be so aggressive." "So what if I force you?" The brown bear's eyes were full of disdain. Its sharp claws did not stop, and its divine power surged as it slapped at Qin Feiyong's head. Chapter 2200. Qin Feiyong felt a great threat, and he retreated once again without hesitation. Humans are indeed trash. They only know how to hide. The disdain in the brown bear's eyes grew stronger and its arrogance became more arrogant. "Trash," Qin Feiyong murmured. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. You dare to show your murderous intent to me? It seems that you really haven't died before." The brown bear grinned and increased its speed. In an instant, it fell behind Qin Feiyong and swung its claws. Puchi! The clothes on Qin Feiyong's back were torn and 5 bloody marks appeared. Drops of purple gold dragon blood kept flowing out. "What? This is purple gold dragon blood." The brown bear was shocked. At the same time, in the valley in the center of the island, the young man also stood up suddenly and looked at the blood on Qin Feiyong's back with disbelief. "Sigh." The masked woman sighed. The young man turned to look at the masked woman and said, "You didn't tell me that he has the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood." At this point, what else is there to say? The masked woman said lightly. "Indeed, there's nothing else to say." The young man nodded and looked at Qin Feiyong again and murmured, "Purple gold dragon blood." In the forest, Qin Feiyong stood in place and did not move. The wound on his back was also healing rapidly under the self-healing ability of the purple gold dragon blood. "Why do you have the purple gold dragon blood?" The brown bear was completely shocked and could not extricate itself. Qin Feiyong slowly turned around and looked at the brown bear. If it was in the north region, he might continue to hide his bloodline power. But in this place, there was no need at all. "Are you deaf? Answer me quickly." Seeing that Qin Feiyong did not speak from beginning to end, the brown bear could not help but yell angrily. "Okay, I'll answer you now," Qin Feiyong said word by word. As his voice fell, with a whoosh, a blood-red light flashed out and instantly disappeared between the brows of the brown bear. Roar! With a painful scream, the brown bear's head immediately exploded like a watermelon. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The divine soul was also shattered on the spot. Instant kill? In the valley. The young man's face stiffened. A perfect divine emperor was killed in an instant? The masked woman said coldly, "He's not that easy." The young man was stunned and joked. "Let's wait and see." She frowned, but she did not say anything more. In the forest. Qin Feiyong expressionlessly glanced at the bloody fur-brown bear's corpse. Then he soared into the air. He didn't try to hide it at all and stood in the air above the forest. "Human, how dare you kill our." All of a sudden. Accompanied to the point. To the forest, to the to fito b to the crowd to the there were at the number of at least more to them. To the to-do to the to. To the end to the way. To Qin Feiyong looked around and said, "I suddenly feel like eating bear paws today. It's a pity that your paws are too small." "How dare you? Kill him!" More than 100 brown bears roared angrily. Waves of divine power surged toward Qin Feiyong like a torrent, carrying a destructive aura with them. These blood-furred brown bears were all perfect Sir Gods and great perfection Sir Gods. With such a lineup, let alone a half-step divine lord, even a perfected divine lord with similar cultivation could only flee for his life. But Qin Feiyong did not change his expression and said, "Although your paws are too small, if you put them together, you can make a stew." "I'm so angry. Human, you're digging your own grave." The group of brown bears roared. "You're the ones digging your own grave." Qin Feiyong's eyes turned cold. He clapped his hands and waves of golden light burst out. Boom! Return formula. In an instant, the golden light and the brown bear's divine powers met in the void. There was a loud explosion between heaven and earth. Void annihilation. The mountains and rivers below collapsed. Dust billowed and covered the sky. How is that possible? At the same time, over 100 brown bears glared angrily at him. That was because they saw their divine power being reflected by the golden light. What kind of technique was that? Roar! In the nick of time, over 100 blood-fur brown bears raised their heads and roared. Their palm-sized bodies instantly expanded with the wind. In the blink of an eye, one by one, huge creatures appeared in front of Qin Feiyong. At that moment, each of the brown bears was a few 100 feet tall. They looked like mountains and their ferocious aura flooded the area. "So this is what you really look like. Then your bear paws are enough," Qin Feiyong said. "You're courting death." Without a doubt. His words completely enraged them. They moved together and waved their fists, which were as big as houses, to crush the divine powers that were reflected back. Then without stopping, they charged toward Qin Feiyong. "So what if you're bigger? You'll still become my meal." Qin Feiyong smiled coldly. An invisible force suddenly roared out from his body. Then, this force, with him as the center, rolled out in all directions. A shocking scene appeared. The hundreds of brown bears were shrouded by the invisible force and immediately howled in pain. The next moment, all the blood-furred brown bears fell down uniformly. With a loud rumble, they smashed into the ground below one after another. In the valley, the young man was dumbfounded. How could he kill all the brown bears in an instant? What the hell is this? How could a mere half-step divine lord possibly accomplish this sort of degree? The masked woman was also surprised. The young man raised his eyebrows and turned to the masked woman. "What kind of technique is that?" "I don't know." The masked woman shook her head. "Aren't you very close to him? You don't know?" The young man frowned. "I've never seen it before," the masked woman said. "It seems that I've underestimated him. I have to use my real strength." The young man sneered. The forest was full of holes. In the void above, Qin Feiyong looked down at the brown bears coldly like a divine lord. That formless power was slowly flowing back into his body. Soul destruction skill. Legendary level killing skill is indeed powerful, after a while. He murmured and a smile crept onto his face. He took out a dagger from his Qian Kuan ring and flew toward the brown bears below. That's right. The formless energy from before was formed by the soul extermination technique. The Soul Destruction skill was one of the 2 legendary-level divine skills that he had obtained in the 9th Heaven Palace's martial skill treasury. It was his first time activating the Soul Destruction skill since he had obtained it. The lethality did not disappoint him. It ignored the defense and wiped out the divine soul directly. As for now, of course, he was going for the bear paws. The perfect Sir God and the perfect Sir God blood-furred brown bear were supreme-grade bear paws. He could not waste them. Boom. However, Qin Feiyong had only managed to cut off one of the bear's paws when a terrifying might suddenly descended. He looked up and his expression changed. In the void above, there was another brown bear. Whether it was its ferocity or its size, it was far more powerful than the previous brown bear. Human die! The crimson fur brown bear came in a menacing manner. Like a deity, it descended from the sky and stomped towards Qin Feiyong. The giant paw that was covered with red fur was like a mountain. It was daunting. Obviously. It wanted to step on Qin Feiyong to death. Qin Feiyong hurriedly took a big step forward and rushed out. As soon as Qin Feiyong left, the brown bear charged toward him. The giant paw stepped on Qin Feiyong's original position. The ground shook. The ground also collapsed and cracked. The rumbling sound was deafening. And there were a few brown bear corpses here. They were directly trampled into a bloody pulp by its paw. Qin Feiyong looked at this scene and felt his scalp tingle. If he did not dodge this paw, he would have become a bloody pulp by now. What a terrifying guy. Human. Seeing Qin Feiyong dodge, the brown bear beat its chest and stamped its feet. It raised its paw again and slapped toward Qin Feiyong with a deafening sound of wind and thunder. Qin Feiyong's expression changed. He used the Xing character formula and escaped. The giant paw fell. With a loud bang, the ground cracked crazily and abyss appeared. The corpses of more than a dozen brown bears were slapped into a bloody pulp. Qin Feiyong broke out in a cold sweat. This blood-furred brown bear was a half-step divine lord existence. Otherwise, the power of its paw could not be so terrifying. What else can you do besides running? The blood-fur brown bear angrily roared again and again as it aggressively slammed its paw towards Qin Feiyong. It's not over, is it? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and activated the soul destruction technique. An invisible force surged out of his body once again and pounced towards the brown bear with an earth-shattering force. However, when the invisible force enveloped the brown bear, it did not cause any harm to it. Qin Feiyong's expression stiffened. Let's see how you can escape this time. Boom. At the same time, the brown bear roared. The giant paw fell. At this time, Qin Feiyong could not dodge. But he did not intend to dodge. Clang. Accompanied by a heaven-shaking explosion, a blood-red sword chi tore through the sky. The brown bear suddenly screamed. The giant paw that slapped toward Qin Feiyong was directly cut off by the sword chi. Fresh blood poured down like a waterfall. The brown bear covered its wound and stared at Qin Feiyong standing on the ground in horror. It kept retreating. It saw that Qin Feiyong had a blood-red long sword in his hand. The sharp edge could tear the sky and the earth. After breaking through to the half-step Sir God, he had officially stepped into the Sir God realm. With his heaven-defying kill formula, half-step paragon gods were no longer a threat to him. Of course, if the opponent had a powerful divine art or a divine weapon, it would be a different story. After all, with a divine art or a divine weapon, the opponent's strength would be multiplied several times. Sigh. But at this time, Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. There was a bit of helplessness on his face. But he was not regretting that he could not kill the brown bear with one strike. It was because of the soul destruction technique. Sure enough. Except for the 6 words divine art, even a legendary divine art could not break the barrier between the major realms. Just like now. The soul extermination art could kill even perfect celestials in an instant, but it couldn't do any damage to a half-step transcendent god. This was the barrier between the major realms. No matter how powerful you were, you could not cross this barrier. Chapter 2201. Phew. Qin Feiyong heaved a sigh of relief and looked at the bear. The bear was filled with fear. One had to know. It was a half-step supreme god and its body was extremely strong. But now, it had been cut in half by a sword. What level of divine weapon was the crimson sword? It was so terrifying. "Leave your paw and get out of here," Qin Feiyong said coldly. Hearing this, the brown bear turned around and ran away in a hurry. "Didn't I say I would leave your paw?" Qin Feiyong shouted. The crimson sword shone brightly and the sword Qi rushed towards the bear. "Didn't you cut off my paw?" The bear was shocked and angry. "I want 2 of them. You haven't given me the other one," Qin Feiyong said. "Don't push me too far," the bear roared. "You came out to provoke me from the beginning?" Qin Feiyong smiled coldly and used the walk formula. He was even faster than the bear. "Stop. I'll give it to you." The bear's face changed and it quickly cut off its paw. It was really scared now. Not only was the crimson sword powerful, but its speed was also terrifying. How could a half-step supreme god be so powerful? This could no longer be described with the word terrifying. It was simply a freak. After the bear paw was broken, the brown bear disappeared from Qin Feiyong's sight with a belly full of fear and sullenness. It didn't even look back. Qin Feiyong did not chase after it. He sent the bear paw back to the black tortoise world and then dispersed the crimson sword. He did not know that the bear was under someone else's orders. Otherwise, he would not have let it go. How many beasts are there on this island? Qin Feiyong scanned the mountains below. The island was huge and he could not see the end of it. The mountains were undulating and the ancient trees were towering. But other than the brown bear, there was no trace of any other ferocious beast. He did not even sense any aura. It was the same as when he first entered the island. However, the appearance of the blood-furred brown bear made him not dare to let his guard down. This island was definitely not as simple as it looked on the surface. There were definitely other ferocious beasts hiding here. Wait a minute. Something doesn't feel right. Qin Feiyong stopped and turned to look in the direction where the brown bear disappeared. For better or for worse, this was the deepest region of the Sky Dragon Sea. Why were there so many consummate godlords, perfect godlords, and half-step transcendent godlords? Logically speaking, in a place like this, even if they didn't surpass the Paragon God level, they should at least be at the Paragon God level. Qin Feiyong frowned and looked up at the sky again. Dark clouds covered the sky outside, but the sun was shining brightly on the island. Why was this? Roar! All of a sudden, a series of beastly roars could be heard. Qin Feiyong was startled, and he quickly turned around to look. He saw sea beasts roaring out from the sea beyond the island. Each of the sea beasts was as large as a mountain. Ferocious! So many! Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. At a glance, there were tens of thousands of sea beasts in the sky above the sea, and the aura they emitted was extremely terrifying. According to Qin Feiyong's judgment, they were all early-stage transcendent gods. What's going on? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Why didn't a single sea beast appear when they flew over the sea? And now there were so many of them? Roar! A group of sea beasts roared into the sky, and then turned into a beast tide, surging toward the island. And there were many sea beasts rushing out from the sea, joining the beast tide camp. Before the beast tide reached the island, the number had already risen to 30 to 40,000. In other words, at this moment, 30 to 40,000 transcendent god-level sea beasts were pouncing toward the island. What kind of lineup was this? Mighty and mighty. Wherever they went, huge waves were set off. Not good. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong's expression changed. These sea beasts seemed to be coming for him. He hurriedly activated the kill formula, and the blood-colored long sword appeared, ready to fight. You've gone too far. In the valley, the masked woman glared at the young man. He killed my favorite pet. Isn't that too much? The young man said. How can you blame him? You're the one who made those blood-furred brown bears attack him first. The masked woman said angrily. That's right. I'm the one who made them attack first. But I didn't really want to kill him. But this person is so ruthless that he killed all my pets. How can I spare him? The young man said. You're being unreasonable. Even an idiot can see that those blood-furred brown bears were ruthless. Do you think that I'm worse than an idiot? The masked woman shouted. I didn't say that. The young man chuckled. The masked woman's eyes darkened, and she stared at the young man saying, Let me ask you again. Do you really want to kill him? Don't worry, don't worry. If I really wanted to kill him, I would have done it myself. Why would I go through so much trouble? The young man smiled. The masked woman frowned and didn't say anything else. She continued to look at the image in the sky with a hint of worry in her eyes. In the sky above the mountains, Qin Feiyong was on high alert. The beast tide had already surged into the island. They were like locusts, densely packed and crushing everything in their path. Roar! The sea beast running at the front suddenly roared. It immediately bared its white fangs and pounced toward Qin Feiyong. They're really coming for me? Qin Feiyong frowned. Then, killing intent flashed in his eyes. He slashed with his sword, and a terrifying sword chi flooded the sky. The sea beast had a cultivation base of novice paragon god, but it was directly cut in half by the sword chi. Its flesh and blood splattered everywhere. However, this scene didn't deter the other sea beasts in the slightest. They bared their fangs and fought with each other as if they were fighting for a piece of delicious cake. Qin Feiyong's eyes were like torches. His sword chi swept across the sky, and the sea beasts died one after another. However, there were too many of them. Qin Feiyong couldn't split himself. Boom! Suddenly, a palm-sized sea beast stealthily snuck up behind him and bared its fangs, heading straight for his back. However, Qin Feiyong was very aware of danger. He made a prompt decision. He activated the battle formula. However, he was still sent flying. His throat heated up and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, he had the battle formula to protect him. Otherwise, this blow would have been enough to shatter his bones. Human, give up resisting. The palm-sized sea beast cackled and disappeared from Qin Feiyong's line of sight in a flash. It wasn't that its speed was very fast, but that there were too many sea beasts around. These sea beasts directly blocked Qin Feiyong's vision. Qin Feiyong ignored the small beast and focused on fighting the enemy. About 100 breaths passed. Qin Feiyong suddenly exhaled, as if relieved of a heavy burden. He was indeed not as nervous as he was at the beginning, because he slowly discovered that although these sea beasts had powerful cultivation, they didn't have any divine arts or artifacts. Without divine arts or artifacts, they were no different from puppets. No matter how many there were, he wasn't afraid. Whoosh! Suddenly, another deadly sense of danger came from behind him. Again! You really haven't died yet. Qin Feiyong's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He turned around and slashed with his sword. The blood-red sword tore through the sky. Ow! Accompanied by a painful wail, the small beast from before suddenly splashed blood in the sky. Roar! The death of the small beast seemed to have completely enraged the beast tide. Each of them was crazier than before. Another pet that I like has been killed. In the valley. The young man's eyes flashed coldly. Closely after, his lips moved and another silent order was transmitted. Mountains and rivers. Blood flowed like a river and corpses were everywhere. Qin Feiyong's body was already soaked in blood, as if he had been soaked in blood. His blood-red hair fluttered in the wind, as if a god of death had descended to the world. At this moment, he had already gone crazy from killing. The blood-red sword in his hand was also surging with blood-red light, exuding an incomparable murderous aura. But those sea beasts were even crazier. It was as if they weren't afraid of death. But suddenly, all the sea beasts stopped and began to retreat. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Why did they stop? There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. They were so crazy before, but now they suddenly stopped. It was definitely not that simple. After coming back to his senses, Qin Feiyong carefully became vigilant. Chapter 2202. What are they trying to do? Qin Feiyong glanced at the beast tide and frowned. He had an uneasy premonition. Roar! All of a sudden, tens of thousands of sea beasts roared in unison, shaking the heavens and earth. Immediately after, a scene that made Qin Feiyong turn pale with fright appeared. Behind the tens of thousands of sea beasts, there were beams of dazzling divine light. There were different colors. Some were blood red, some were light blue, some were light yellow, some were dark green, some were black, some were pure gold. Tens of thousands of colorful divine lights intertwined with each other like fireworks, dazzling and dazzling. However,
Qin Feiyong was not in the mood to enjoy such a beautiful scene. This was because each beam of divine light exuded a fatal danger. This kind of danger shrouded his entire soul. Even the crimson sword in his hand could not dispel it. Roar! Ow! Chirp! Clang! Clang! Almost in the next instant, there were various loud noises in the sky. There were the roars of beasts. There were the sharp cries of beasts. There were also the metallic sounds of divine weapons being unsheathed. At this moment, the entire world was drowned by these sounds. Just this formless sound wave was enough to cause Qin Feiyong's blood and qi to surge. When he looked up at the sky, his face was instantly filled with horror. At this moment, there were countless beasts and beasts floating in the sky, as well as all kinds of divine weapons. Regardless of whether it was the beasts, or divine weapons, they all exuded a destructive aura. Qin Feiyong swallowed his saliva. They were all fighting souls. That was right. The beasts, and divine weapons were all transformed from the fighting souls of the sea beasts. There were tens of thousands of sea beasts, which meant that there were tens of thousands of fighting souls. How magnificent was this? How shocking was this? As everyone knew, fighting souls had super powerful powers that exceeded one's cultivation level. Some rare fighting souls were even more powerful than perfect, pinnacle, and legendary level divine arts. One could imagine. At this moment, Qin Feiyong was facing tens of thousands of fighting souls and was in a bad situation. I was careless. I only thought of divine arts and divine weapons and completely ignored their fighting souls. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. Living humans and ferocious beasts, even if they didn't have divine arts or divine weapons, were still different from mindless puppets. Roar! But before he could think any further, tens of thousands of sea beasts roared in unison. Rumble! Immediately, the battle souls that filled the sky brought with them an overflowing might as they charged toward Qin Feiyong from all directions. With so many fighting souls, it was impossible to dodge. Qin Feiyong's heart sank. The blood-red sword flew out of his hand like a bolt of lightning and shot towards the war spirit. With a loud bang, none of the fighting souls were crushed, but the blood-red long sword instantly disintegrated. Qin Feiyong was also heavily injured by the collapse of the blood-colored sword. Purple-gold dragon blood gushed out from his wounds. As expected, it won't work, Qin Feiyong mumbled. Although the kill formula was powerful, it had its limits. The cultivation of these sea beasts was already a realm higher than his. With the addition of the fighting souls, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the combat strength of these sea beasts was comparable to Great Perfection Paragon God, Great Perfection Paragon God, or even Great Perfection Paragon God. In the face of such power, the kill formula couldn't defy nature. Unless he activated the slaughter zone. But for now, there was no need to activate the slaughter zone. Weapon spirit, come out and help. Qin Feiyong said to himself. Tens of thousands of fighting souls had already charged toward him. The terrifying aura made him feel unprecedented despair. I can't do anything. However, the weapon spirit refused to help him. Can't do anything? Qin Feiyong was stunned and hurriedly asked, why can't I do anything? Because once I do anything, it will attract even more powerful beings. At that time, even if I do my best, I won't be able to bring you away safely. The weapon spirit said in a deep voice. Even more powerful beings. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. Before entering the island, I tried to stop you, but you insisted. Are you afraid now? The weapon spirit said with dissatisfaction. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and didn't dare to stay any longer. He immediately entered the Black Tortoise world. But immediately after, he appeared again. Because he suddenly remembered that the child had said that the current Black Tortoise world was still very weak and couldn't withstand the attack of an immortal, let alone the indiscriminate bombardment of tens of thousands of fighting souls. Now there was only one place he could go, and that was the ancient castle. Swish! Without thinking, he hurriedly entered the ancient castle again. Boom! The fighting souls attacked. The void shattered, and the earth sank. Seawater surged. The hundreds of thousands of miles of island was quickly swallowed by the sea. Qin Feiyong stood in the ancient castle and watched this scene. He couldn't help but shudder. If he didn't dodge, would there still be a person left? Perhaps not even a piece of bone would be left. Mu Tianyang got up and walked to Qin Feiyong's side. Looking at the scene outside,
he frowned and said, "You should listen to the weapon spirit." Qin Feiyong said, "But I keep feeling that there's something strange about this island." "Nonsense. If there's nothing strange, why would we be surrounded by so many sea beasts?" Mu Tianyong rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyong was stunned when he heard that. "What's wrong?" Mu Tianyong was suspicious. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, "Your words have reminded me of something. Why did these sea beasts suddenly gang up on me?" Mu Tianyong guessed, maybe this island has some special meaning to them. Qin Feiyong said, "But didn't the beast god of the sky dragon sea order not to attack me?" "That's right." Mu Tianyong was stunned and hurriedly said, "These sea beasts are all revered by the beast god, so they definitely wouldn't dare to disobey the orders of the beast god." "They wouldn't dare to disobey the orders of the beast god," Qin Feiyong muttered. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyong looked at each other at the same time, their eyes full of surprise. Mu Tianyong asked, "What did you think of?" "Beast god." Qin Feiyong said word by word. "Me too. Since the beast god ordered not to attack you, the sea beasts of the sky dragon sea would definitely not dare to disobey. But now, not only did they attack you, they even launched a beast tide. Then there's only one explanation. This is another order of the beast god. In other words, it was the beast god who launched the beast tide." Mu Tianyong said in a deep voice. "But why would it do that? One moment to protect me, the next moment to kill me. Isn't that contradictory?" Qin Feiyong frowned. Mu Tianyong looked at the island in the image and said, "Could it be that there's something on this island that I don't want you to know?" "Something that you don't want me to know," Qin Feiyong muttered. "That's not right." Suddenly, Mu Tianyong's eyes trembled and exclaimed, "This beast god must be on this island right now." Qin Feiyong was surprised. "You want to? If it's far away from here, how can it launch a beast tide? And if it's far away, it's impossible for it to know that you're going to enter this island. After all, the sky dragon sea can't send messages, nor can it open the altar. And it's only strong. It rules the sea beasts here, but it's not the guardian or ruler of the ancient realm. It can't break the rules here." Mu Tianyong said. "Makes sense." Qin Feiyong nodded. "Since this beast god is on this island, then I'm really curious, what exactly is it hiding?" The corner of Mu Tianyong's mouth raised. Qin Feiyong said in surprise, "You want to? Let's go meet it." Mu Tianyong's eyes flashed, he turned his head to look at Xueqi and laughed. "Brother Hua, are you interested in this?" Xueqi stood up and laughed. "Since I have nothing to do, I'll go with you guys to take a look." Qin Feiyong shook his head helplessly. This was the so-called knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain, but heading towards the tiger's mountain. However, he was also full of interest. Why did this beast god issue an order to the sea beasts of the sky dragon sea not to hurt him? Chapter 2203. Outside. Hundreds of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers had been completely swallowed by the sea, becoming a part of the sea. The waves rolled, covering the sky and the sun. In the sky, the beast tide did not leave. All the sea beasts released their divine senses, searching the void. As a supreme god-level sea beast, their intelligence was not lower than that of humans. How could a living person disappear into thin air? So he must still be here. However, no matter how they searched, they could not find any trace of Qin Feiyong. Could it be that there is a hidden soul stone? The sea beasts were surprised. If there was a hidden soul stone, then it would be difficult. "Everyone, don't worry. The hidden soul stone is not omnipotent." "That's right. Although the hidden soul stone can block our divine senses, as long as we imprison him, he won't be able to escape." "Yes, immediately mobilize divine power and trap him here." Boom! Divine power emerged one after another. A huge barrier immediately appeared, covering all directions. In this way, even if he has a hidden soul stone, even if he has a spatial divine item, he won't be able to escape. A sea beast laughed sinisterly. Swish! Before he finished speaking, 3 figures appeared out of thin air inside the barrier. It was Qin Feiyong, Mu Tianyong, and Xueqi. "There are more helpers?"
The beast-tide looked at Mu Tianyang and Xueqi. But immediately after, their eyes were full of disdain. They were merely two perfection-stage war gods. They were even more insignificant than ants, let alone paramount gods like them. These guys are quite smart. Mu Tianyang glanced at the barrier and chuckled. Yes. Xueqi nodded. Don't talk nonsense, let's show them some power. Otherwise, they will really think that we are fish on the chopping board that can be slaughtered by them. Qin Feiyong said. Mu Tianyang waved his hand, and with a clang, a blood blade appeared. The spirit of the Grey Castle appeared and looked anxiously at Qin Feiyong and the other two. Are you really going to do this? The three of them were silent. Why don't you listen to my advice? The spirit looked at Qin Feiyong and said angrily. Shut up. But suddenly, a cold shout came from the Bloodblade. Obviously, it was Bloodblade's artifact spirit that spoke. The artifact spirit looked at Bloodblade. A dignified heaven-defying divine artifact is actually so cowardly. Don't you feel ashamed? Bloodblade shouted. You don't understand. The artifact spirit said. I really don't understand your weakness. I only know that those who stand in my way will die. Xueqi roared, and suddenly, a bloody light shone out. The next moment, blood-colored light blades surged out in all directions like an avalanche. Crack! The enchantment instantly shattered. The beast-tide was in an uproar. How could he be so strong? Die, all of you! Blood Edge grinned maliciously. A blood-colored blade of light swept through the sky, rushing towards the beast-tide. Roar! Following a series of painful roars, one sea beast after another died under the blood-red blades of light. In less than 3 breaths, the beast-tide disappeared. Corpses fell into the sea one after another and were swallowed by the seawater. The sea within a radius of 100,000 miles was dyed blood-red. So powerful? Xueqi stared at Blood Edge, dumbfounded. Of course. A heaven-defying divine artifact like me is not just for show. Of course, except for some cowards. Blood Edge said proudly. Who are you calling a coward? The artifact spirit of the Grey Castle suddenly frowned. Who am I calling a coward? Blood Edge sneered. You. The artifact spirit's eyes widened in anger. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said, Shut up. Since you don't dare to make a move, then stay quietly in the Qi Sea. All right. You will regret it. The artifact spirit snorted coldly and disappeared into Qin Feiyong's Qi Sea. Mu Tianyang put away his blood blade and laughed. Let's go. The three of them immediately flew towards the center of the island. But suddenly, Mu Tianyang stopped and looked up at the sky. A trace of suspicion gradually crept into his eyes. What's wrong? Qin Feiyong and Xueqi looked at him in confusion. Mu Tianyang shook his head and said, It's nothing. I just feel that the sun in the sky is a little familiar. The two of them looked at each other. Who hasn't seen the sun before? It's normal to be familiar. Maybe it's an illusion. Let's go. Mu Tianyang shook his head and laughed. The three of them turned into a stream of light and shuttled through the sky above the island like lightning. As I said, he's not someone to be trifled with. In the valley, the masked woman returned to the stone bench and smiled while drinking tea. Looking at the young man again. Looking at Qin Feiyong and the other two on the screen, his face was quite ugly. So many sea beasts were actually killed in an instant? In this world, the most terrifying thing is not ignorance, but not being afraid of death. If it were someone else today, facing the sea beasts you summoned, they would definitely be scared away. But Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang, they are two strange creatures. They are not interested in places that are not dangerous. The masked woman said. Is that so? The young man murmured. If you don't believe me, you can continue to try. Anyway, there are a lot of sea beasts with minor accomplishment, great accomplishment, perfection, and even perfection. The masked woman sneered. Don't provoke me. Since the sea beasts can't deal with them, I'll do it myself. The young man laughed. The masked woman suddenly stood up. What? You want to blame me for breaking my promise to you again? Please don't be mistaken. They are the ones who offended me again and again. The young man's expression suddenly turned cold. Then,
He raised his arm and pointed his index finger at the scorching sun in the sky. Boom! The next moment, an invisible force gushed out from the tip of his finger. Like a waterfall, it flowed against the current and surged towards the blazing sun. At the same time, Qin Feiyang and the other two who were flying above the island stopped and looked up at the sky above the center of the island. What is that? The three of them were surprised. What they sensed was that invisible force. The aura is so strong. Could this be the doing of the beast god? Xueqi said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and urged, "Let's go and take a look." Whoosh! The three of them rushed toward the center of the island. However, Mu Tianyang looked at the scorching sun in the sky from beginning to end. The suspicion in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Crack! Suddenly, a deafening sound exploded in the sky, as if something was broken. Following closely, a surprising scene appeared. The scorching sun in the sky began to rotate slowly. At the same time, a vast and ethereal aura spread out from the scorching sun. It felt as if a god sealed in the scorching sun was gradually awakening. Moreover, as the scorching sun rotated, the temperature above the island gradually rose. This aura... Mu Tianyang suddenly stopped in the air. The suspicion in his eyes turned into surprise. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang and the other two noticed Mu Tianyang's abnormality and quickly stopped and looked at him in confusion. Why is it here? It shouldn't be. This must be an illusion. Perhaps it's just a similar aura, Mu Tianyang murmured. What exactly did you find? Qin Feiyang frowned. Illusion, it must be an illusion. Mu Tianyang shook his head. Crack. However, as soon as he finished speaking, another loud sound exploded in the sky. It was louder than the previous sound. After this loud noise, the vast aura surged out like a flood that had been opened. Qin Feiyang and the other two were immediately shrouded by the aura. And the temperature soared in an instant. The world seemed to have turned into a big furnace. In the blink of an eye, Qin Feiyang and the other two were sweating profusely. In their hearts, there was a sense of contempt. They felt that this aura was like the power of heaven, inviolable. It's not an illusion. It's this aura. But why is it here? Mu Tianyang's body shook. He looked at the scorching sun in the sky again and muttered with disbelief in his eyes. What exactly did you find? Qin Feiyang's heart was blocked. He really wanted to kick Mu Tianyang. If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you keeping me in suspense? Mu Tianyang withdrew his gaze and looked at Qin Feiyang. He said word by word, "This aura is exactly the same as the heaven-defying artifact in your ancestor's hand." What? Qin Feiyang's expression suddenly became sluggish. The aura was exactly the same as the heaven-defying artifact of his ancestor. I didn't say before because the aura was very weak. I couldn't be sure. I also didn't dare to believe it. How could his heaven-defying artifact be here? But just now, the aura completely erupted. I can finally be sure. It can't be wrong. The scorching sun we saw was transformed from your ancestor's heaven-defying artifact. Mu Tianyang stared at the scorching sun in the sky and said in a deep voice, "Transformed from my ancestor's heaven-defying artifact." Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled, and suddenly looked at the scorching sun. If Mu Tianyang's judgment was not wrong, then why would his ancestor's heaven-defying artifact be floating there? Wait a minute. Could it be that his ancestor was also on this island? He quickly scanned the island. But on the island, he didn't feel his ancestor's bloodline power. Stop looking. I also didn't sense your ancestor's aura. I think there are only two explanations. First, your ancestor is sealed and can't sense it. Second, the beast god of the sky dragon sea killed my ancestor and stole his heaven-defying artifact, Mu Tianyang said. Sealed? Killed my ancestor. Qin Feiyang's body stiffened. These two possibilities were not good news. Because, if these two possibilities were true, then his ancestor must have met with misfortune. No. I must find the beast god immediately. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. If it was really as Mu Tianyang said, then this so-called beast god must die today. Although he had never seen his ancestor, he could walk all the way to today and have his current achievements. His ancestor's contribution could not be ignored. Towards his ancestor, he had always maintained a heart of respect and gratitude. Moreover, If his ancestor was unfortunately killed, then Lu Zhangyang, who was with his ancestor, would definitely be doomed. As the ancestor of the Lu family, Lu Zhangyang was naturally his ancestor. He couldn't ignore it. Boom. But just as Qin Feiyang was about to continue rushing to the center of the island, accompanied by a deafening loud noise, the scorching sun suspended in the sky actually spewed out a flame, carrying an aura of destruction, rolling toward Qin Feiyang and the other two. It was like a heavenly flame, melting the void. Qin Feiyang and the other two's clothes were also turned to ashes one after another, and the skin all over their body was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. The intense pain of being burned made their faces couldn't help but distort. Chapter 2204. This is the ancestor's heaven-defying artifact? Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. Under the aura of this artifact, he felt as small as an ant. I know the power of this artifact very well. We must find the beast god as soon as possible, or the consequences will be unimaginable. Mu Tianyang said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, even the blood blade is no match for this artifact? In terms of level and power, these two heaven-defying artifacts are equal, but the beast god's cultivation is stronger than ours. The most important thing is, my blood blade is the same as your ancient castle and Xueqi. A part of its power has been sealed. Mu Tianyang said. Sealed? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and frowned. That's not right, since it's sealed, why can it still activate the law of time? Qin Feiyang said. Mu Tianyang rolled his eyes at him and said, can't your ancient castle and Xueqi also activate the law of time? That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded. Xueqi's law of time was space travel. The ancient castle's law of time was time stop. Mu Tianyang said, if there is no seal on a heaven-defying artifact like the Bloodblade, it is no exaggeration to say that it is enough to destroy a great world. So terrifying? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked, what about the ancestor's heaven-defying artifact? It also has a seal. But looking at the aura it is emitting now, it seems that the seal has weakened a lot. In other words, even the blood blade may not be able to defeat it. Mu Tianyang said. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, artifact spirit, is this the reason why you stopped me from entering the island? It's only one aspect. The artifact spirit replied. If it's only one aspect, then what's the other aspect? Qin Feiyang was surprised. The artifact spirit did not answer and said, if you really believe me, listen to me and withdraw immediately. Withdraw? Qin Feiyang murmured. He looked at the scorching sun in the sky and said, my ancestors' heaven-defying divine weapons are all here. Do you think I will still withdraw? If you really care about me, then come out and help me. You're really stubborn. The artifact spirit said angrily. I don't care if I'm stubborn or stupid. Today, I must see the beast deity and ask him for an explanation. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and turned to look at Mu Tianyang. He said, the Grey Castle won't help. It's up to you now. Mu Tianyang took a deep breath. Clang. The blood blade appeared again. I've never seen such a cowardly heaven-defying divine artifact. The blood blade's artifact spirit roared angrily. Clearly, it was talking about the Grey Castle. Following closely, the bloody blade trembled, and bloody light surged, turning into a sea of blood. It smashed towards the surging flames, and in an instant, they collided. Rumble! A world-destroying aura was suddenly born, and it surged out in all directions. But whether it was the bloody light or the flames, they did not dissipate. The two madly collided in the void, deadlocked. From the current situation, we should be able to hold on for a while. Let's go to the center of the island and find the beast deity. Mu Tianyang said. What about the blood blade? Qin Feiyang asked. When the time comes, it will come to us. Don't waste time, let's go. Mu Tianyang shouted. Qin Feiyang nodded. Whoosh! The three of them suddenly turned into a stream of light and flew towards the center of the island. Sure enough, they're a few troublesome little guys. However, if you want to get close to this place, it's not enough with just this method. In the valley. The young man looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two in the image, and the corner of his mouth pursed into a playful smile.
Roar! Outside the sea. Roars could be heard all of a sudden. Qin Feiyong and the other two were stunned. When they looked in the direction of the sound, their faces suddenly changed. Huge sea beasts roared and rushed out of the sea one after another. This is really going to be a big mess. Hua Yi's face was pale. At a glance, there was no end to the sea. It was difficult to count how many sea beasts there were in the sky at this moment. Their terrifying power roared in all directions. There were beginner paragon gods. There were beginner paragon gods. There were even perfected paragon gods and perfected paragon gods. How shocking this was! One had to know that not long ago, just those beginner paragon god sea beasts had almost killed Qin Feiyong. And now, there were even perfected paragon god sea beasts. How were they going to fight them? There was no hope of winning at all. Hua Yi swallowed and said with difficulty, not only did they revive the heaven-defying divine artifact, but they also summoned so many powerful sea beasts. Brother Qin, why don't we retreat first? If you want to retreat, then retreat, Qin Feiyong said. After all, the current situation had developed to a point where it was out of control. He couldn't force Hua Yi and Mu Tianyang to continue taking risks with him. Qin Baishan's divine artifact is here. I won't retreat, Mu Tianyang said. Don't be stupid. Bloodblade is restrained by the divine artifact in the sky. Grey Castle doesn't plan to make a move at all. With the strength of the three of us, how can we fight those sea beasts? Brother Qin, even if you activate the slaughter zone now, it's too late, Hua Yi said angrily. Roar! As soon as he finished speaking, 1,000-foot-long sea elephant suddenly roared. Immediately, the sea beasts in the sky turned into a torrent and rushed toward Qin Feiyong and the others. And that sea elephant was a perfected paragon god sea beast. Hua Yi urged. Where there's life there's hope. Don't hesitate anymore. Qin Feiyong glanced at the sea elephant, then at the sea beasts, and finally fixed his gaze on the center of the island. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. As long as the beast god was captured, the sea beasts would naturally not dare to act recklessly. But the beast god ruled over this area, so it was definitely stronger. How difficult would it be to capture it? Qin Feiyong hardened his heart and looked at Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi. You two go to the castle first. I'll activate the slaughter zone. Previously, the tens of thousands of early-stage paragon god sea beasts had been killed by Bloodblade, their corpses sinking into the sea. As long as he could find these corpses and absorb their blood, it should be enough to solve his urgent problem. As long as he had enough strength, he could kill these sea beasts. Naturally, their blood would be inexhaustible. The power of the slaughter formula would naturally grow stronger and stronger. At that time, he wouldn't even need to fear a divine artifact, let alone a mere beast god. Will we make it in time? Mu Tianyang asked. It shouldn't be a problem. Qin Feiyong scanned the sea below. There was a lot of blood in the sea, and it could still be absorbed. All right then. Mu Tianyang nodded. Swish. At this time, the spirit appeared again, looked at Qin Feiyong, and said in a deep voice, Do you really want to do this? Don't you want to think about it again? The ancestor's divine artifact is here. How do you want me to think about it? Do I still have the mood to think about this? Qin Feiyong said angrily. All right. This venerable will accompany you in your madness. The spirit took a deep look at Qin Feiyong and sighed. Really? Qin Feiyong was overjoyed. Although you are very foolish, your persistence, as well as your feelings for Qin Batian, has moved this sovereign. What Bloodblade said actually makes sense. This venerable cannot lose face for a heaven-defying divine artifact. The spirit said. Hearing this, not only Qin Feiyong, Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi were also overjoyed. With this guy's help, plus Bloodblade, there would definitely be no problem. Clang! The Grey Castle appeared, and the spirit rushed into the Grey Castle. Immediately, a monstrous demonic aura emerged. Let's go! Then the spirit roared and continued to rush toward the center of the island with Qin Feiyong and the other two. As for those sea beasts, they were killed by the Grey Castle before they could even get close. Their journey was unimpeded without any delay. Finally, the valley in the center of the island entered the line of sight of Qin Feiyong and the other two. You really know how to enjoy yourself.
Looking at the peach blossoms everywhere and the fragrance of the valley, the three sneered. And look, there seems to be a courtyard there. Xueqi suddenly pointed to the center of the valley and exclaimed. Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang looked and saw a courtyard. And in the courtyard, there seemed to be two people standing there. The three were stunned. Wasn't this the nest of the beast god? How could there be humans here? Qin Feiyang said. Spirit, go to the center of the valley. The spirit responded and led the three straight to the center of the valley. It's a man and a woman. As they got closer, everything in the courtyard became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's body stiffened, his eyes firmly locked on the masked woman standing in the pavilion. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? How could the fire lotus be here? Mu Tianyang and Xueqi were also surprised. Almost at the same time, the three rubbed their eyes hard and looked at the pavilion again. Qin Feiyang's face was suddenly full of surprise. They were not playing tricks on him. They were not playing tricks on him. The masked woman was the fire lotus. What's going on? Why is the fire lotus on this island? And who is the man next to her? Mu Tianyang and Xueqi frowned. Qin Feiyang looked at the gray castle and said, Shouldn't you give me an explanation? You've already seen them, what's there to explain? You'll naturally understand later. The spirit said. Swish. After a few breaths, the gray castle landed outside the courtyard with Qin Feiyang and the other two. Qin Dage. Fire Lotus quickly ran out of the pavilion and ran towards Qin Feiyang. But suddenly, the young man blocked in front of Fire Lotus and said with a frown, Don't forget our agreement? Fire Lotus's delicate body stiffened and stopped. She looked up at Qin Feiyang and then lowered her head, as if she did not dare to look directly at Qin Feiyang's eyes. Agreement? Originally, Qin Feiyang was also filled with joy. However, when he saw the young man stopping Huolian and saying those words, he started to frown. Mu Tianyang and Xueqi also had a look of suspicion. Why did it seem like Fire Lotus was being threatened? Qin Feiyang, Mu Tianyang, Xueqi. You guys are quite capable. Even blocking like this couldn't stop you. The young man looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two and laughed. And Qin Feiyang and the other two were stunned. Listening to these words, the one secretly controlling the sea beasts was this person in front of them? Wait a minute. Wasn't only the beast god able to control these sea beasts? Xueqi looked at the young man and said, Brother Qin, Brother Mu, be careful. This person's aura is stronger than our 9 Heavens Palace's great elder. Qin Feiyang and Xueqi were startled and quickly looked at the young man carefully. They didn't know if they didn't look, but when they did, they were shocked. As Xueqi said, this person's aura was stronger than their great elder. Chapter 22:05. He was even stronger than the Grand Elder. What did that mean? In other words, the young man before him was at least on the same level as the Deputy Palace Master of 9 Heavens Palace. Those sea beasts also surrounded the valley. Ferocious aura was overwhelming. The clash between Bloodblade and the divine weapon in the sky was still ongoing. The entire sky above the island was filled with a destructive aura. Suddenly, the young man looked at the grey castle and shook his head. You're very disobedient. I have no choice. I tried to stop them. As you can see, they insisted on coming. The weapon spirit said hoarsely. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the grey castle and frowned. You guys know each other? Fire Lotus is here. What do you think? The weapon spirit said. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and asked suspiciously, What are you doing here all of a sudden? Do you know how worried I was? Fire Lotus lowered her head and remained silent. Qin Feiyang said angrily, Raise your head and look at me. Fire Lotus's gaze trembled as she slowly raised her head and looked at Qin Feiyang. Answer me, what exactly happened? Also, what was the agreement you guys mentioned earlier on? Qin Feiyang asked. Nothing. Fire Lotus shook her head. Qin Feiyang said angrily, If it's nothing, why did you listen to him? Fire Lotus stammered. The young man raised his brows and looked at Qin Feiyang. All right, don't force her. My heart will ache. Is it your turn to feel heartache? Who are you? Why did you leave Fire Lotus here? Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice.
She left it here herself. I didn't force her. As for who I am, haven't you guys been looking for me? Why don't you know who I am now that we're standing face to face? The young man mocked. Looking for him? Qin Feiyong and the other two exchanged glances. Suddenly, the three of them shuddered and stared at the young man in shock. Boom! At the same time, the young man's body suddenly released a divine light. Following that, a behemoth appeared out of thin air. It was a divine dragon. His body was dozens of meters long, covered in fiery red dragon scales, and the two dragon horns on his head seemed to be made of magma, emitting a dazzling radiance. Fire dragon. Qin Feiyong and the other two were in disbelief. It turned out that the heavenly dragon sea's beast god was actually a fire dragon. The fire dragon circled above the valley and looked down at Qin Feiyong and the other two. Its dragon's might surged as it shouted, "Why aren't you kneeling after seeing me?" Kneel? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Dragons, dragons, fire dragons, dragon, dragon, dragon? Dragon, 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 dragon? Hualong looked down at the three of them and said arrogantly, "Dragon, dragon, dragon, the three Li Li." Still not convinced. The fire dragon was overbearing. Qin Feiyong said with a cold smile, "Since you're so high and mighty, then why did you still come to the heavenly dragon sea?" The fire dragon said, "I am under the orders of the revered dragon to guard the North Sea, so as to prevent you lowly ants from sneaking into the divine prefecture." "What? Are you the one sent by the dragons to guard the entrance to China?" Qin Feiyong exclaimed. "Yes." The fire dragon nodded. "I see." Qin Feiyong was suddenly enlightened. He looked at the gray castle and said, "The other aspect you're talking about is its identity, right?" "That's right. Dragons, not to mention you, even I don't dare to offend them." The artifact spirit sighed. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "There's nothing to hide about this kind of thing." Qin Feiyong frowned. After a moment of silence, the artifact spirit said, "It's because of the fire lotus." Fire lotus? Qin Feiyong was stunned and looked at the fire lotus suspiciously. Hey, hey, hey. I told you to kneel and kowtow. Didn't you hear me?" When the fire dragon saw that Qin Feiyong actually ignored it, it was very displeased. "Kneel and kowtow? Just you?" Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang raised their heads at the same time and looked at the fire dragon. "You've got guts. Since I took charge of the North Sea, no one has dared to be so presumptuous." The fire dragon was furious. Dragon might rolled out and oppressed Qin Feiyong and the other two. Wait. I didn't contradict you. Why do you count me in?" Xueqi hurriedly said. "Because you didn't kneel and kowtow either." The fire dragon said. Xueqi was stunned and suddenly grinned. "Are you worthy?" "Bastard." The fire dragon was immediately furious. Dragon might covered the sky and earth. As soon as the dragon might descended, Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang couldn't help but turn pale. Their legs also trembled violently. They felt as if there were several mountains on top of their heads. One must know. They had opened the door of potential. And not just 1 or 2 levels. But even so, it was still unable to withstand the dragon's might. One could well imagine how strong the fire dragon was. However, Xueqi on the side didn't move at all. There was still a playful smile on his face. It was as if he wasn't affected at all. The fire dragon was proud, but when he saw Xueqi, his eyes suddenly widened. "What's a mere dragon might?" Xueqi grinned. With a wave of his hand, the dragon might that enveloped Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang seemed to disappear. And Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang felt their bodies lighten. They immediately turned around and looked at Xueqi in shock. This dragon might, even they who had opened the door of potential couldn't withstand it, but Xueqi actually looked so relaxed. What was even more excessive was that he even blocked this dragon might for them. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Wait, could it be the Palace Master token? He remembered that back in the Great Council Hall, with the Palace Master token in hand, the second elder couldn't hurt Xueqi at all. Xueqi looked at the fire dragon and smiled. "If I say you're not worthy, then you're not worthy. Do you have any objections?" Boom. The fire dragon was irritable. He felt that his self-esteem had been trampled. The dragon might suddenly rose and slapped towards the three of them. Clang. It was also at this moment. The gray castle flashed and appeared above Qin Feiyong and the other two, blocking the dragon's tail. How dare you? The fire dragon shouted angrily. I'm sorry. Qin Feiyong is this lord's master. Master is in trouble. How can this lord sit idly by? The artifact spirit laughed hoarsely. The fire dragon shouted, This lord knows that you are very strong, but aren't you afraid of my dragon's revenge? I am. Of course I am. In the entire ancient realm, who isn't afraid of you dragons? The artifact spirit said. Then you still dare to disobey this lord? Get out of my way immediately. The fire dragon shouted. Although I'm afraid, there's nothing I can do about it. Who asked this lord to have such a fearless master? The artifact spirit chuckled, his tone carrying a hint of helplessness. The fire dragon's gaze darkened as he glanced at the three of them and the gray castle. Suddenly, as rays of divine light appeared, it transformed into a human body and landed beside the fire lotus. Qin Feiyong also looked at the fire lotus and smiled. I'm here, don't be afraid, come over quickly. The fire lotus looked at Qin Feiyong, and after a long time sighed. You guys can leave. Leave. Qin Feiyong was stunned and asked, What about you? The fire lotus said, I've already decided to stay here to accompany him. I won't allow it. Qin Feiyong and Xueqi shouted almost at the same time. Mu Tianyang looked at Xueqi suspiciously. Why was this guy so anxious? But Xueqi turned a blind eye to Mu Tianyang's gaze and looked at the fire lotus. If it's because he threatened you, you don't have to worry at all because we're here. Don't ask, just leave. Hualien turned around and said without looking back. There was a trace of indifference in her tone, but there were tears in her eyes. Qin Feiyong frowned. The young man glanced at the fire lotus, then looked at Qin Feiyong and the others, his eyes flickering. The fire lotus realized that something was wrong. She looked at the young man and said, Don't forget our agreement, let them go. The young man smiled and said, If you care so much about them, I'll be jealous. The fire lotus raised her eyebrows. Okay. For your sake, I won't bother with them. The young man finished speaking and looked at Qin Feiyong and the others, saying, Originally, you guys trespassed here and killed so many of my pets, so only death awaits you. But there's no other way. Who told me to have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Since she's spoken, you guys can leave. The artifact spirit looked at the three and said, Why don't you leave? I'm not leaving. Xueqi shook his head. Mu Tianyang looked at Xueqi suspiciously. Why was it that the more he looked at him, the stranger he became? It seemed that he cared more about the fire lotus than Qin Feiyong. Xueqi's answer made the young man's face sink. He said, Don't be so shameless. Don't be angry. Mu Tianyang chuckled and looked at the young man. If you want to leave, that's fine. But there are some things that you have to make clear first. What is it? The young man was suspicious. Mu Tianyang pointed to the scorching sun in the sky and said, Why is it in your hands? If I remember correctly, it should be Qin Baishan's artifact. The young man heard this and his eyes suddenly became playful. He said, Since you care so much about that artifact, it seems that your relationship with Qin Batian is not shallow. You can say that. Mu Tianyang nodded. What about you? As a descendant of Qin Batian, don't you want to know? The young man looked at Qin Feiyong again. When he saw the purple gold dragon blood, he had already suspected the relationship between Qin Feiyong and Qin Batian. Later on, when Mu Tianyang saw the blazing sun coming back to life, he also revealed Qin Feiyong's identity. The young man had been watching them in the valley, so he knew that Qin Feiyong was a descendant of Qin Batian. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, This is one of the reasons why I came to find you. Do you really want to know? I'm afraid that you can't take the blow. The young man joked. Qin Feiyong said provocatively, Then why don't you tell me? Okay. Then I'll tell you. I snatched this divine weapon from Qin Baishan's hands. As for Qin Batian, he has already died. And there's also a person called Lu Zhengyang. The young man said. What? Qin Feiyong's body trembled. Mu Tianyang was also stunned. Is he really dead? After coming back to his senses, Mu Tianyang looked at the young man and asked, How did he die? Do you still need to ask?
I was the one who snatched his divine artifact, so naturally, I killed him. The young man laughed. You killed him? Mu Tianyong frowned, disbelief written all over his face. What? You don't believe me? The young man said. Don't say that I look down on you. I know them too well. You may not be able to kill Qin Batian, let alone Lu Zhengyang. Mu Tianyong sneered. Chapter 2206. You dare to question my strength? The young man flew into a rage out of humiliation. Mu Tianyong frowned, looked at the young man in white and said, Unless you can take out strong evidence. Haha. The young man was stunned, then raised his head and laughed, saying, You actually ask me for evidence for this kind of thing? Are you joking? Mu Tianyong raised his eyebrows. It seemed that he had indeed said something very stupid. Moreover, isn't that divine artifact the best proof? The young man laughed until he was convulsing. Have you laughed enough? But suddenly, a cold and bone-chilling voice sounded. The temperature in the valley plummeted, as if it was winter. The person who spoke was Qin Feiyang. His ancestor was actually killed? This was absolutely unforgivable. Clang! A blood-colored long sword appeared. Qin Feiyang grabbed the blood sword and slashed at the young man. The young man glanced at the blood-colored long sword, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, full of disdain. Following closely, he actually did not dodge, raised his arm, and gently touched the tip of the sword with his index finger. Clang! Immediately, the sound of metal vibrating could be heard. The moment the tip of the blood-colored long sword met with his fingertip, it was actually blocked. This, Mu Tianyong's pupils shrank. He was actually able to block the blood sword formed by the kill character formula with just one finger? Mu Tianyong's pupils shrank. More importantly, the young man's fingertip did not have the slightest wound after clashing head-on with the blood sword. Just how strong was this person? This move of yours is indeed very powerful. But in front of me it's useless. The young man looked at Qin Feiyang with a disdainful smile, and flicked his index finger slightly. Crack! The blood-colored long sword suddenly began to shatter from the tip. In the blink of an eye, the blood sword in Qin Feiyang's hand shattered into pieces. And at the same time, a huge force surged. Qin Feiyang was shaken back on the spot. With a puff, purple gold dragon blood spurted out, and his face turned pale. Did you see that? Your strongest technique is so weak in front of me. What else do you have to fight me? The young man crossed his arms in front of his chest, showing his disdain to the fullest. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. The person in front of him was like an unreachable mountain. Just by looking at him, a deep sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. This was an opponent that he could not defeat. The young man glanced at the three of them and the gray castle. He shouted impatiently, I've already given you a lot of face. Scram now, or else this will be your burial ground. So arrogant? Xueqi raised his eyebrows and glanced at Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyong. He looked at the young man and said with a smile, I'll take you on. You. The disdain on the young man's face deepened. Yes, that's me. Xueqi nodded. All right. I'll fulfill your wish. Killing intent surged in the young man's eyes. Seeing this, Fire Lotus's face changed and shouted, Xueqi, take Qin Dage and leave immediately. You're already here, why should I leave? If you want to leave, we'll leave together. Xueqi said. This is an order. Fire Lotus said in a deep voice. Xueqi frowned. Fire Lotus sighed and said, Don't worry, I'll be fine. After 5 years, I'll be able to leave and find you. 5 years? Xueqi was suspicious. This is the agreement between him and me. Since I've already agreed, I'll do it. Fire Lotus said. What kind of agreement is it? Xueqi said angrily. Mu Tianyong also looked at Fire Lotus suspiciously. Qin Feiyang had also calmed down. This young man in front of him was definitely not a match for him. He had to find out why Fire Lotus stayed here. Why are you asking so many questions? If I tell you to leave, then leave. Fire Lotus shouted. Xueqi said, If we don't figure out this matter, I believe that no one will leave here.
Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang again. Mu Tianyang said lightly, I'm most concerned about Qin Batian and Lu Zhangyang. Qin Feiyang did not speak, but his eyes said everything. Let me say it. Suddenly, the artifact spirit spoke. Xueqi looked at the gray castle and urged, say it quickly. 5 years ago, after Qin Feiyang went into seclusion to cultivate, I accompanied Fire Lotus and entered the Sky Dragon Sea. As for the reason for entering the Sky Dragon Sea, it was to clear all obstacles for Qin Feiyang. The artifact spirit said, clear all obstacles for me? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. Fire Lotus knows that you want to enter Divine Land. But on the way to Divine Land, there are many dangers. She doesn't want you to have an accident, so she entered the Sky Dragon Sea to get rid of these hidden dangers. For example, killing the beast emperors of various regions. This way, it can have a deterrent effect. When you enter the Sky Dragon Sea, the sea beasts of the Sky Dragon Sea will not dare to attack you. The artifact spirit said. This? Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other. It turned out that all of this was because of Fire Lotus. Wait. Does Fire Lotus have the strength? Mu Tianyang was surprised. The artifact spirit said, we'll talk about this later. First, tell me the reason why Fire Lotus stayed here. Okay. Go ahead. Mu Tianyang said. The journey was very smooth. The beast emperors of various regions were almost all killed by us. In the end, we successfully came to this island. At first, we thought that this island was also the territory of a beast emperor, but when we found this place, we found that there was actually a human. Which is the person you see now. But at first, we didn't know that he was the beast god of the Sky Dragon Sea, and we didn't know that he was sent by the dragons to guard the entrance to Divine Land. Later, there was no doubt that we had a conflict. At first, Fire Lotus and I both thought that we could easily get rid of him. However, we didn't expect that he was not only powerful, but also had a heaven-defying artifact. In the end, when he revealed his true body and revealed his identity, we immediately realized that we had provoked an existence that we shouldn't have. The power of the dragons is not something you can imagine. Even this sovereign does not dare to openly oppose them. So, Fire Lotus and I were ready to run for our lives. But at that moment, he made a condition. The condition was that Fire Lotus stay here and accompany him for 5 years, and he would not pursue the matter of us killing the beast emperors of various regions. And he would not stop us from entering Divine Land. Due to the power of the dragons and Qin Feiyang's yearning for Divine Land, Fire Lotus hesitated for a moment and agreed. The artifact spirit said, is that so? Qin Feiyang looked up at Fire Lotus and asked. Yes. Fire Lotus sighed and nodded in response. So it's all for me, Qin Feiyang murmured. For 5 years, he had been cultivating in seclusion without any worries, but Fire Lotus had been running around for him. She even sacrificed her freedom in order to let him enter Divine Land. What kind of man was he to let a woman do so much for him? Qin Dage. You don't have to blame yourself. I did it willingly. Besides, I'm very happy to be able to do something for you. Fire Lotus hurriedly said. Willingly. Happy. I, Qin Feiyang, am not worthy. Qin Feiyang roared angrily to the sky. Qin Dage, don't be like this. Fire Lotus looked anxious. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at Fire Lotus. He shook his head and said, you're really a silly girl back then, we just met by chance. Is it worth it for you to do this for me? Although we just met by chance, but you've always been good to me, taking care of me, and protecting me, just like a brother to his sister. This kind of satisfaction and happiness is something I've never felt before, so I'm willing to do anything for you. And in my heart, I've long regarded you as my biological brother. Fire Lotus said with a smile. Biological brother. Satisfaction, happiness, Xueqi murmured. I don't deserve it. Because I can't even protect you, and you even have to protect me. I don't even deserve to be called a man. Qin Feiyang murmured, his face full of self-mockery. It's not like that. Fire Lotus hurriedly shook her head, burning with anxiety. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, looked at the young man and said, Fire Lotus, I must take her away today. Is that so? The young man smiled coldly. Xueqi sighed deeply,
turned to look at Qin Feiyong and said, "Let's go."
Go.
Qin Feiyong immediately glared at him. Xueqi sighed. "I know you're blaming yourself and angry now, but please don't let down Fire Lotus's painstaking efforts." "Yes, Qin Dage." "Dragons, you can't afford to offend them. Since there's a way to have the best of both worlds, why can't we settle this peacefully? This is good for you, for everyone," Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyong. "Fire Lotus has a point. Moreover, she's not in any danger here, she's only here for 5 years. After 5 years, she'll naturally come to us." The artifact spirit also persuaded. "Dragons, I can't afford to offend them." "But I, Qin Feiyong, am not afraid of them." Qin Feiyong stared at the young man, and as his voice fell, his long hair and eyes quickly turned blood red. And at the same time, a shocking murderous aura spread out from his body. "This is..." Fire Lotus's pupils shrank. After being with Qin Feiyong for so long, she naturally knew Qin Feiyong's methods. This was clearly the precursor to opening the slaughter domain. Mu Tianyang chuckled. In fact, Fire Lotus, Xueqi, and Grey Castle still didn't understand Qin Feiyong. Dragons have reverse scales, those who touch them will die. Qin Feiyong's reverse scale was his family and friends. Whoever dared to hurt his family and friends, no matter how terrifying the opponent was, he would make them pay the price at all costs. This was Qin Feiyong's personality. Even without Fire Lotus, with the news of Qin Batian and Lu Zhengyang's death, Qin Feiyong wouldn't let it go. In other words, today's battle was already destined when Qin Batian's divine artifact appeared. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.